Chapter 3700. Xueshang's actions were open and honest. When the few god kings got the answer, they all showed an ashamed expression and cupped their hands towards him. Although it was an apology, it was impossible to get a response from Xueshang, not to mention an understanding. Both parties had their own ulterior motives. It was just that they had not seen the mine and it was not the time to split the loot, so they did not fall out with each other. Just as everyone was silent and the atmosphere was awkward, the right guardian flew back from afar. Just now he took the initiative to land on the wasteland and carefully checked the 2 pits and gullies. He returned to Xueshang and cupped his hands and said softly, "Clan leader, there's a new discovery." Not only was Xueshang shocked, the other god king's eyes also lit up as they stared at the right guardian. Under Xueshang's signal, the right guardian did not use the voice transmission method and directly said it. "I have carefully observed those pits and gullies. They should be traces of excavation today, and there are still some residual divine aura. Although the divine aura is faint, I can tell that it was done by a middle god king." The right guardian was a 9th stage god king and had mastered many secret skills. Naturally, his methods were extraordinary. It was just that the news he spoke of caused Xueshang and the few god kings to be stunned. Excavated today? A middle god king did it? How is this possible? The protector of the right pondered for a moment and continued, "I would like to make a bold guess. The surrounding mines should have appeared no more than 10 hours ago." What? Xueshang was even more confused. The other god kings also showed an expression of disbelief and exclaimed, 10 hours? At that time, we had just rushed into star-devouring grotto heaven and were fighting with the Taotai clan. If what the right guardian said is true, then someone took advantage of the battle between us and the Taotai clan and dug the mine away in advance. The person who dug the mine must be from the Taotai clan. If it was someone from another clan, it would be impossible to sneak in without being detected by the Taotai clan. I am sure that the despicable bastard who took the opportunity to dig the mine has not left star-devouring grotto heaven yet. He must be hiding somewhere. The last words of the 3 Kings Temple's second leader reminded Xueshang and the other god kings. Xueshang subconsciously turned his head and looked towards the north. There, at the edge of the star-devouring paradise, was a lonely starry cliff, which was the closest to the starry sky. A murderous aura flashed through Xueshang's eyes, but he quickly hid it. He said expressionlessly, "Everyone, the truth is about to be revealed. Let's not waste any more time. Let's split up and search for the miner." With that, he looked at the god kings coldly, waiting for them to split up. However, the divine kings were no fools. They dilly-dallied, unwilling to separate. They even wanted to move together. Xueshang immediately became furious. His complexion became gloomy as he shouted angrily, "That bastard is merely a medium divine king. What are you afraid of? I promise that whoever catches that thief will get an extra 500 billion in resources." Although the few god kings were silently cursing in their hearts, what they were afraid of was not the mine thieves, but him, clan head Xueshang. However, Xueshang had thrown out 500 billion resources as a reward, so everyone could only split up and search north. Seeing that everyone had left, Xueshang took the right guardian and headed north expressionlessly. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the star-devouring grotto heaven, on the lonely starry cliff, Ji Tianxing, Divine King Luoho and Yank stood at the peak of the palace at the top of the cliff, looking at the brilliant starry sky close at hand. The starry cliff beneath their feet was not as intact as it was in the past. The entire cliff was on the verge of collapse. There were dozens of cracks of various sizes and hundreds of holes the size of houses. Looking at those marks, one could tell that this was the work of the 3 of them. Moreover, they had already dug out all the precious resources inside the starry cliff. 80% of the resources in the star-devouring grotto heaven had already entered Ji Tianxing's pockets. Not to mention the 260 ore veins, just the top ores and materials dug out from the starry cliff were already a shocking amount of wealth. Although he had not counted them, Ji Tianxing had a rough estimate. The value of these resources, if not 100 trillion, was at least 80 trillion. Whether it was in his previous life or this life, this was the first time he had such a huge amount of wealth. Even if he used this wealth to create 2 myriad demon alliances, it would be enough to last for more than 1,000 years. Of course, if he wanted to last for thousands of years, he would have to rely on his own blood and profit. When I came to the starry cliff before, I was only thinking about Tao Yongxing's ambush and did not observe carefully. I did not expect the top materials and ores of the star-devouring grotto heaven to be hidden in this lonely peak. Ji Tianxing looked down at the starry sky and said with a smile. This trip was smooth and perfect, so he was naturally in a good mood. Divine King Luoho also smiled and nodded. Xianxia and the others fought with the Taotai clan to the death, but young master was the one who benefited the most. This trip can be called perfect. Although the star-devouring grotto heaven's location is special, new ore veins are constantly being produced. However, young master has dug out all the ore veins. Even if Xianxia controls the star-devouring grotto heaven, he will have to wait 2,000 to 3,000 years to recover 20 to 30%. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, Tao Yongxing was too pedantic and stubborn in the end. He ruined the Taotai clan's bloodline. In comparison, that Xianxia is more patient, vicious, and ruthless. Divine King Luoho raised his eyebrows and asked in a low voice, if that is the case, then this old servant will find an opportunity to finish him off to prevent future trouble. Forget it. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, he is quite tactful and for some reason he does not dare to do anything to me. There is no need to add more karma. Divine King Luoho nodded to show that he understood and reminded, young master, although you and I restrained our auras when we were mining just now and did not have to worry about exposing our whereabouts. However, this Yank, I'm afraid he left his aura and traces. Do you want this old servant to deal with it? Hearing his name, Yank was a little nervous and ashamed. Ji Tianxing waved his hand again and said, he is only a mid-level divine king after all. There is no need to be harsh. As for the remnant divine power aura, there is no need to pay attention to it. Yank has not shown himself in front of Xianxia. He will not guess that it is me. Besides, 10 hours have passed. Xianxia has most likely succeeded and is about to start mining. Hearing this, Yank could not help but laugh and say, hee hee, those fellows were mining happily only to find a desolate and empty mine. I wonder how wonderful their expressions will be. Ji Tianxing was about to laugh and tease him when his consciousness suddenly sensed that someone was rapidly approaching. He immediately stopped smiling. Divine King Luoho also sensed that someone was approaching and said expressionlessly, they have already discovered the abnormality. We should go. Amen. Ji Tianxing nodded in response. Then he put Yank back into the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and concealed his aura with Divine King Luoho before flying south. The two of them were cautious and circled 20,000 kilometers to avoid the 2 divine kings who were hurrying over. However, for some reason, the leader still sensed the abnormality and immediately locked onto Ji Tianxing and Divine King Luoho's position with his consciousness. In the next instant he teleported and charged over. Chapter 3701. Without a doubt, the 2 experts who had rushed over were Xianxia and the Right Protector. Both of them were 9th-level Divine King experts and had mastered many divine powers and secret techniques. Naturally, they could not be underestimated. Ji Tianxing and Luoho's method of concealing their presence and aura was brilliant. No matter how powerful the Right Protector was, he could not detect their presence. However, Xianxia had already used Patriarch Xianxi's indestructible golden body and was still fused with him. This would drain his divine power constantly and would not be suitable for long-term fusion. However, in the star-devouring grotto heaven, how could he let his guard down when killing and plundering? The reason why he was able to sense the auras of Ji Tianxing and Luoho God King wasn't because he was strong. It was because Patriarch Xianxi's indestructible golden body was a top divine artifact that was not inferior to the primordial chaos bell. Detecting Ji Tianxing and Luoho's aura was only one of its effects. Swoosh. Starry Cliff was just ahead, but Xianxia suddenly changed directions. The Right Protector naturally understood that something was amiss and hurriedly followed. In the blink of an eye, Xianxia had rushed to Ji Tianxing and Luoho's vicinity. He was less than 100,000 feet away. Although the night sky looked dark with specks of starlight, there was nothing. However, Xianxia still swung his saber decisively and used a divine power that could split heaven and earth. He slashed at the invisible Ji Tianxing and Luoho. Swoosh, swoosh. 6 blood-red saber lights that were 10,000 feet long blocked the duo's path of retreat and slashed down violently. The saber lights contained hundreds of laws and divine powers. Not only did they seal the space within 10,000 miles, but they also contained the 5 elements, wind, lightning, and other divine powers. Ji Tianxing and Luoho were in danger, but they did not panic. They continued to remain invisible and counterattacked. Originally, Ji Tianxing had planned to retreat and not be entangled with Xiang and company. After all, he had already obtained what he wanted. There was no need to expose himself. However, not only did Xiang discover them, but he also attacked with all his might, vowing to delay them. This made it impossible for Ji Tianxing and Luoho to escape. They could only defend themselves. Swoosh, swish. Ji Tianxing unleashed several resplendent sword lights with his palm, while God King Rahu unleashed several fist lights. In order to hide their identities, the two of them did not use their full strength, nor did they use their signature divine powers. However, the two of them had extraordinary strength. In an instant, they destroyed the 6 bloody lights and broke through Xiang's seal. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the two of them hurriedly sped away. However, the protector of the right rushed over as fast as he could and cast a spell to intercept him. Damned thief, trying to escape after snatching food from the tiger's mouth? As he spoke, the right protector also waved his saber and slashed out saber lights that filled the sky. He also waved his palm and unleashed boundless blood flames. The space within a radius of 10,000 miles was sealed once again, as firm and unbreakable as ice. Ji Tianxing and God King Rahu had no choice but to launch another counterattack. Only a series of muffled bangs could be heard as the secret techniques of the two sides collided high in the sky, bursting out destructive shock waves that spread out in all directions. The right protector's attack was shattered and he was sent flying back with minor injuries. However, Xiang charged over again. Relying on the invincible defense of his indestructible golden body, he fearlessly intercepted Ji Tianxing and God King Rahu. Just like that, Ji Tianxing and God King Rahu defended against Xiang and the right protector's attacks as they fled into the distance. If it were any other day, Xiang and the right protector would definitely not be their match in an open battle. However, the current situation was special. The two of them had to conceal their figures and auras, and they could not use their signature divine powers. Naturally, their combat strength was reduced. Under such circumstances, the battle actually ended in a tie. It was difficult to tell who would win. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing and God King Rahu retreated as they fought, gradually leaving the starry cliff. However, something that made them even more infuriated happened. The commotion caused by the Four's battle could be clearly seen from tens of thousands of miles away. Gale's second palace master, Three Kings Temple's second leader, Shihi vice sect master, and the others were searching everywhere for traces of the thief. Suddenly, they saw the commotion of a great battle in the depths of the grotto heaven. Their faces lit up with joy, and they hurried over to help as quickly as possible. There are people fighting over there. It must be clan leader Xiang who discovered the thief. That thief actually dared to steal our mineral resources. He's courting death. Everyone hurry over and help. No matter what, we can't let that thief escape. He has hundreds of trillions of resources on him. The 6 God King experts transmitted their voices to each other and rushed over with murderous intent. In a short span of 20 breaths, the 6 of them arrived at the battlefield one after another and joined up with Xiang and the right protector. The scene was a little strange. They could not see any traces of the enemy at all. Xiang and the right protector seemed to be fighting with the air. However, the God Kings were all experts. They naturally understood that the opponent was invisible. When they calmed down and used their divine powers to sense, they discovered that there was more than one invisible opponent. Immediately, the 6 God Kings were a little stunned. They waved their divine weapons and joined the battle while asking about the situation. Wasn't it said that the thief who stole the mineral vein was a middle-level God King? Why is it a high-level God King? And there are 2 of them? Clan leader Xiang, are you sure that these 2 fellows are the thieves who stole the mineral vein? Whether these 2 are thieves who stole the mineral vein or the remnants of the Taotai clan, they have to die today. Right. Clan leader Xiang is right. These 2 fellows hiding in the star-devouring grotto heaven must be strange. We can't leave them alive. Today's matter can't be leaked out. Therefore, we have to silence them no matter what. While the God Kings were fighting, they discussed loudly for a while before coming to a consensus. Following that, the 8 God Kings spread out and besieged Ji Tianxing and God King Luoho with all their strength. Originally, Ji Tianxing and God King Luoho maintained their concealment and did not use their trump cards. They could still deal with Xiang and the right protector. At this time, facing the besiegement of the 8 god kings, the two fell into a disadvantage and were surrounded by danger. If they continued to hide their identities, they would have to pay a heavy price. Even if they did not die, they would be seriously injured. In desperation, Ji Tianxing and God King Luoho could only use their trump cards. Absolute shadows of 10 directions. Ji Tianxing roared angrily and his body flashed with golden light. Instantly, 6 doppelgangers appeared. He maintained his concealment while the 6 doppelgangers appeared in the sky and attacked the 8 god kings valiantly. The two sides temporarily separated and faced each other while maintaining a distance. Seeing the 6 Ji Tianxing appear, the god kings were filled with fear and were secretly on guard. Xianxia and the right protector saw this familiar scene and looked at the doppelgangers. Suddenly, their faces changed and their eyes were filled with shock. "It's you. You are here." The two of them exclaimed at the same time. Their faces were extremely ugly and they subconsciously retreated 1,000 feet. Chapter 3702. During the battle at Surging Sun Lake, Ji Tianxing fought Tao Yongxing, the high priest Xianxia and the right guardian alone. The 3 elders of the Taotai clan and the elites of the Blood Massacre Hall of the Xianxia clan could be ignored. In that battle, Ji Tianxing had also used the 10 directional shadows. Moreover, Tao Yongxing had died in that battle and Xianxia and the right guardian had been poisoned and heavily injured. Therefore the two of them had a deep memory. When they saw the 6 clones, they recognized that it was Long Tian. The other 6 god kings had just calmed down when they saw that the 6 white-robed youths were all clones. Just as they were thinking about how to deal with it, they saw Xianxia and the right guardian turn pale with fright. The 6 god kings were also shocked. They hurriedly retreated 1,000 feet and asked in confusion, "Patriarch Xianxia, what's going on? Do you know the owner of these 6 clones?" Hearing the god king's questions, Xiaxia's expression turned ugly. He shouted in a deep voice, "He's Long Tian." The right guardian, who had always been silent, also added an explanation. Tao Yongxing, the Taotai clan's patriarch, was killed by him. Hearing that, the 6 god kings were stunned for a moment. Then their expressions changed drastically. All of them were shocked and aghast. "What? He's Long Tian? The Dragon Clan youth that the Myriad Demon Alliance issued a bounty for? He's the one who killed Tao Yongxing and heavily injured Patriarch Xianxia and the Right Guardian? Wasn't he hunted down by various experts and disappeared long ago? Not only do the experts of the various regions in the northwest want to kill him, but the Myriad Demon Alliance also ordered his death. Even the Xuanji Grotto Heaven issued a bounty and sent countless experts to kill him. Such a cruel and ruthless person, causing the experts of the entire Starsource continent to hunt him down. They searched the entire world but failed to find him. I didn't expect him to be hiding in the star-devouring Grotto Heaven." Clearly, the God Kings knew Long Tian's identity and his terrifying strength and battle record. Everyone was anxious and terrified. For a moment they did not dare to attack again. Since Ji Tianxing's identity had been exposed, he no longer concealed himself and openly revealed his true body. Shua. With a flash of white light, he appeared in the sky with his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the sword of burial of heaven. He looked at Xianxia and the others expressionlessly. When Xianxia and the right guardian saw him, their pupils contracted, and the 6 divine kings were filled with wariness and their nerves were taut. Ji Tianxing ignored the 6 god kings. His gaze landed on Xianxia and he said with a cold smile, "What? Have you forgotten your lesson and your oath to the heavenly Tao?" Xianxia pursed his lips and did not dare to answer. He quickly retreated with the right protector. Not only was he afraid of Ji Tianxing's strength and methods, but he also didn't dare to violate the heavenly oath. The 6 god kings were confused. They looked at Xianxia in confusion and thought to themselves, "What heavenly oath? Why is Xianxia so scared?" Seeing Xianxia and the right enforcer show weakness, Ji Tianxing shifted his gaze and looked at the 6 divine kings. Immediately, a formless pressure enveloped the 6 god kings, causing them to feel even more pressured and uneasy. Ji Tianxing sneered again, "You want to stop me with just the few of you? Get lost if you don't want to die." Such arrogant and conceited words filled the 6 god kings with humiliation and rage. However, due to Long Tian's terrifying strength and battle record, they subconsciously lowered their heads and retreated. Ji Tianxing smiled disdainfully as he stepped into the sky and was about to leave. Xiang was unwilling and hurriedly said, Long Tian. I admit that I'm not your match and my Xianxia clan won't deal with you anymore. However, you're risking your life alone while we have the numbers. You're so arrogant, do you really think that those 6 experts can't stop you? Hearing these words, the 6 god kings felt much more relaxed and recovered most of their confidence. However, thinking about it carefully, their emotions were complicated and filled with anger. What does Xiang mean? He and the right protector don't dare to deal with Long Tian? They mentioned the heavenly oath just now. It's most likely related to this. Damn it. Xiang and the right protector aren't doing anything, but they want the 6 of us to deal with Long Tian? Isn't this sending us to our deaths? The 6 god kings looked at each other and discussed secretly through voice transmissions. Seeing that they were hesitating, Xiang continued, Long Tian, we spent so much effort to eradicate the Taotai clan. However, you reaped without sowing and snatched away the mineral resources that originally belonged to us. That's a treasure worth hundreds of trillions. You want to leave just like that? That depends on whether everyone agrees or not. He could not attack Ji Tianxing due to the heavenly oath, but he was good at instigating and using the 6 god kings. As expected, the 6 hesitating god kings were provoked by the mineral resources worth hundreds of trillions. They were instantly enraged and filled with killing intent. Their originally retreating footsteps stopped. Their hesitant eyes also became firm and ruthless. The 6 god kings held divine weapons and blocked Ji Tianxing's path. Long Tian, we have no enmity with you and we respect your reputation and battle record. However, you've gone too far. Not only did you reap the benefits, you didn't even leave us a mouthful of soup. Simply despicable. Long Tian, we paid such a huge price. It's impossible for us to return empty-handed. The 2 of them returned to their invisible state and concealed their auras. Passing through the misty abyss, the 2 of them flew into the sky. At the same time, they spread their divine senses in all directions to investigate the situation around the abyss. They saw that the Xianxia clan's blood-red divine worship had already disappeared without a trace. The divine worships of the other 4 forces were still hovering above the abyss. However, the godly kings and godly lords guarding the divine worships were obviously anxious and worried. One look at their expressions and it was clear that they had already guessed that something had happened in the star-devouring grotto heaven. After all, they must have seen Xiang fleeing in a panic and hurriedly driving the divine worship away. Godly King Rahu glanced coldly at those people and sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. Young master, should we kill those people as well? Although he was loyal to his former master, the Heavenly Dragon Emperor, and was amiable to Ji Tianxing, he was still a snake. After all, he was a snake man and the leader of the Myriad Demon Alliance. He would not be soft-hearted and did not lack ruthlessness and decisiveness. However, Ji Tianxing rejected this suggestion and quietly left the abyss with him. No need. Those people from the other 4 forces are not clear about the situation in the grotto heaven. Moreover, there are too many of them and they have divine worships to rely on. It will take a lot of effort to kill them. It will be a waste of time. Young master is so kind and benevolent. Then this old servant will spare them. Luoho God King replied before leaving with Ji Tianxing. After 100 breaths, the 2 were 80,000 miles away from the abyss. Only then did godly King Rahu take out the divine worship and fly north with Ji Tianxing. The mission for this trip had been completed. Although there were some flaws and loopholes, it was still satisfactory. Next, the master and servant only wanted to quietly return to the dark water region. They did not want any more twists and turns on the way. Moreover, they wanted to return to the Myriad Demon City before the news spread. Otherwise, the godly kings under the Xuanji Grotto Heaven would definitely rush over to kill Ji Tianxing once they learned of his whereabouts. The master and servant were powerful and had the backing of the Myriad Demon Alliance. Naturally, they were not afraid. However, if they were involved in these killings, it would be troublesome and a waste of time. However, how could the cunning and ruthless Xiang, who had suffered such a great loss today and suffered such heavy losses, swallow such humiliation silently? Even if he was restrained by the heavenly oath and could not deal with Ji Tianxing. However, when he left the star-devouring grotto heaven, he spread the news and even informed the people of the Xuanji Grotto Heaven. Not long after he left the star-devouring cave, he sent a message back to the Myriad Demon Alliance and ordered a few elders to lead a large number of elites to eliminate the experts hiding in the Darkwater realm. Their mission was to ensure the safety of the Darkwater region and prevent anyone from intercepting or assassinating the young master. God King Luoho trusted Zhou Xian and company's abilities greatly. Therefore, as long as he brought the young master back to the Darkwater realm, they would be safe. The only thing he had to worry about was the journey back to the Darkwater region. Inside the divine battleship, Xianxia was not in the hall. He had already entered the secret chamber to meditate and count the spoils of war. This trip to the star-devouring paradise was his greatest gain so far. He spent a total of 5 days in the distorted space of the divine pagoda before he finished counting the spoils of war. The godhead fragments of the 7 god kings and the 7 spatial rings had brought him close to 4 trillion worth of resources and treasures. After all, the 7 god kings who were killed were the leaders of various sects and forces. Naturally, they were rich. However, this wealth and resources were insignificant compared to the mineral veins. Xianxia sorted it out. There were exactly 260 mineral veins dug out from the star-devouring cave. Most of them were star mineral veins that could be refined into precious star divine stones. A small number of mineral veins were even rarer divine stones that could be refined into precious divine gold. They were the best materials for refining high-end divine weapons. After Xianxia counted the mineral veins, he realized that he had most of the materials needed to refine the sword of burial of heaven. There were only 2 or 3 supplementary materials left, which were not too difficult to obtain. He believed that the Myriad Demon Alliance would be able to gather them quickly with just a command. Only after returning to the Myriad Demon Alliance can I truly cultivate in seclusion and improve my strength. Then I have to refine the sword of burial of heaven and try to restore it to a king-grade divine weapon. At the very least, it has to be a king-grade high-grade divine weapon. If I have spare time, I will use these minerals and metals to refine a set of divine weapon equipment for Yao Yao, Ku and Wushuang each. Thinking of this, he was very happy and satisfied. After counting the spoils of war, he put all the mineral veins into an interspatial ring. Swoosh! He flew through the distorted 5-colored space and landed on the other side of the bloody flame sacred tree, appearing in front of Yank. Yank had used a lot of divine power to mine in the star-devouring cave. At this moment he was meditating. Sensing Xianxia's arrival, he quickly stopped meditating and stood up to salute. Master, what are your orders? Chapter 3705. It would take at least 2.5 days for Divine King Luoho to return to Thousand Demon City. Xianxia could cultivate in seclusion for 100 days in the distorted spacetime. He knew that the journey back to Thousand Demon City would not be peaceful. But he believed in Divine King Luoho's methods. He did not need to worry about small problems. It was indeed so. After leaving the star-devouring grotto heaven, Divine King Luoho's divine worship was pursued 13 times and intercepted 4 times. The 17 forces that pursued and intercepted the divine worship were all led by a few divine kings and a large number of divine monarch experts. Of course, most of the divine kings were in the 5th to 7th stage. They had not encountered any 8th or 9th stage divine kings yet. Powerhouses of this level were simply too few in number. Normally, it was also very rare to see one. Originally, with Divine King Luoho's strength, he could kill all the forces even if he fought them head-on. But he disdained to do so as it would be a waste of time and delay the journey. Moreover, that was exactly what the Origin Dragon Emperor wanted. It would give him more time to plan and make arrangements. Therefore, Divine King Luoho used his rich experience and powerful strength to drive the divine worship away from the 13 groups of pursuers. No matter how hard the 13 groups of pursuers chased, they could only look at the back of the divine worship and sigh. They could not get close at all. As for the 4 interceptions, there was no way to avoid them. After all, those interceptors had set up arrays and ambushes, waiting for him to be exhausted. What Divine King Luoho could do was to avoid the traps and ambushes as much as possible to avoid being delayed and wasting time. If he could avoid them, he would do so. If he could not, he would charge forward recklessly. In this way, he successfully broke through the 4 interceptions and left safely. The 4 groups of interceptors also paid a terrible price. At least 16 divine kings and over 300 divine monarchs died under Divine King Luoho's divine worship and sharp blades. Just like that, the first day passed. At the same time, Divine King Luoho was halfway through his journey and entered the Azure Snow region. Back then, Zhou Xian led the Thousand Demon Alliance experts to intercept Ji Tianxing in the Azure Snow region's Guiyan mountain range. In other words, Ji Tianxing went missing in the Azure Snow region. Naturally, half of the experts who had come to search for Ji Tianxing under the orders of the Profound Secrets Utopia were gathered in the realm of Azure Snow. This place was the focus of the various God Kings' search. Early in the morning, the sky had just begun to brighten. God King Rahu was piloting his divine battleship. He was flying through the clouds as fast as a stream of light. In order to avoid bumping into those interceptors, he didn't rush north in a straight line. Instead, he took a detour. Unfortunately, too many forces had gathered in the Azure Snow region. Under the command of the mysterious paradise, the various God Kings had long since made preparations for an ambush. Thus, God King Rahu welcomed the first batch of assassins of the day. Swish, swish. Dozens of beams of divine light suddenly lit up in the sea of clouds in front of the divine ship. More than 40 figures appeared. 8 figures as large as mountains charged forward with an indomitable aura. God King Rahu had long since been on guard. He instantly saw that these were 8 God King experts. The 3 strongest people were all 7th stage realm upper-level God Kings. The other 5 were all 6th stage realm middle-level God Kings. These 8 God Kings executed their ultimate secret techniques and brandished their divine weapons. They used powerful killing moves to besiege the divine ship. And behind them there were 36 upper-level God Lords. They formed the heavenly constellation Brilliant Star Battle Formation and charged forward aggressively. Clearly this force was very strong. It far surpassed those interceptors yesterday. No matter how strong God King Rahu was, he couldn't pilot the divine ship and force his way through the interception of those experts. These interceptors are smart. They knew that by setting up the divine array in advance, I would sense it and take a detour to avoid it. Moreover, they have mastered a brilliant concealment technique. I only sensed their presence when I was only 10,000 miles away. Haha, they must have received guidance from the mysterious paradise. In the control room of the divine ship, God King Rahu sneered coldly. He finally stood up. Swish. He waved his hand and shot out a beam of divine light, keeping the divine ship. His figure, which was not very tall, appeared in the sky and was rather thin and stooped. He faced the 8 God Kings and 36 God Kings alone with his saber. Strong winds blew in the sky. Killing intent blotted out the sky. The space within 20,000 miles was nearly frozen. God King Rahu stood proudly in the sky. He was not afraid. The strong winds blew his purple robe. His snow-white hair danced behind him. An indescribable confidence and dominance spread out from his body and swept through the world. The 8 godly kings and 36 godly sovereigns who were charging at him felt it the most directly. They were even a little dazed. They felt that they were not facing a white-haired old man but a towering mountain. As a result, everyone was under immense pressure. They were puzzled and fearful. Naturally, everyone's charging speed slowed down, and their momentum also weakened a lot. Who dares to be so impudent? God King Rahu pointed his saber at the ground. He didn't attack but asked in a booming voice. The moment he said this, the 8 God Kings froze. Strange expressions appeared on their faces. Fortunately, their leader raised his hand and ordered everyone to stop. Everyone hurriedly stopped their charge and stopped 100,000 feet away from God King Rahu. The 8 God Kings looked at each other and secretly communicated with their divine senses. Then a tall and burly leader stepped forward and said expressionlessly, "We are from the sky-bearing sect in the south. We are under the orders of the Dragon Emperor to kill the evil Long Tian. Who are you? How are you related to Long Tian?" Hearing this, God King Luoho sneered and asked, "Someone from the sky-bearing sect? No wonder you don't recognize me. As for the Long Tian you speak of, I am also searching for him. I just don't have any leads at the moment." Only when they heard that did the God Kings come to a realization. As it turned out, the withered old man wanted to kill Long Tian just like them. However, the sky-bearing sect's great guardian obviously didn't believe God King Rahu's words. His gaze was sharp as he sized up God King Rahu. He asked, "Although we are from the south, we are not unfamiliar with the various experts and top forces in the north. From your tone, you seem to be a hero of the north? Please forgive this king's poor eyesight. Your excellency looks very unfamiliar. May I know which force your excellency is from?" Clearly, God King Rahu had used some means to change his appearance. When he first saw Xianxia, his appearance was that of a burly man over 10 feet tall with a head full of purplish-black hair. He looked like a middle-aged man. Now he had become a thin and stooped white-haired old man. His aura was also gloomier and more ruthless. He was like a cold and sinister venomous snake, choosing its prey to devour. No one knew which was his true appearance between the burly man and the white-haired old man. Chapter 3707. Heartless Divine King's words made Luoho Divine King's heart thumped. Although Heartless Divine King was lying in ambush here, daring to make a move proved that he had his suspicions. But Heartless Divine King's tone was so certain that it still made Luoho Divine King feel surprised and shocked. But he guessed that the other party was just suspecting and guessing and definitely did not have any evidence, so this move was most likely probing. Moreover, he had always been shrewd, so how could he possibly expose himself at this moment? He perfectly revealed a stunned expression before frowning. His face was filled with a cold smile as he looked at the Heartless Divine King with a hint of anger. Heartless Divine King, water must have entered your brain. This seed is currently searching everywhere for Long Tian's traces and haven't found him yet, so how can I hand him over to you? Moreover, not only Profound Secrets Grotto Heaven is offering a bounty for him, our alliance has already offered a sky-high reward and sent out countless experts to search for him. If we really find him, our alliance will deal with him naturally, so how can we hand him over to you? Seeing that Luoho Divine King's expression did not seem to be fake, Heartless Divine King was stunned for a moment. He frowned and sized up Luoho Divine King for a moment, not knowing what he was thinking. At this moment, more than 40 experts from the Sky-Bearing sect hurried over. Although they did not receive Heartless Divine King's instructions, they did not dare to make a move against Luoho Divine King. But they still maintained their vigilance and spread out, surrounding Luoho Divine King. Luoho Divine King was extremely confident as he ignored everyone from Sky-Bearing sect and stared at Heartless Divine King, saying expressionlessly, "If Profound Secrets Grotto Heaven feels that our alliance's rise threatens Dragon Emperor's rule, we can have an open battle. This seat might admire Dragon Emperor's domineering attitude. But this kind of secretive means really makes this seat look down on you. Moreover, are you even fit to make a move against this seat? Call your Dragon Emperor over instead." Luoho Divine King's tone was arrogant and his attitude was contemptuous, totally disregarding Heartless Divine King. Heartless Divine King was unable to restrain his anger as he sneered, "Luoho, stop pretending and don't try to change the topic. Don't forget that Xianxia, who informed this king, is also a 9th stage realm Divine King. Do you really think that no one knows what happened in Star-Devouring Grotto Heaven?" Apparently, Xianxia had mentioned that Long Tian's invisible companion was probably from the 10,000 Demon Alliance when he reported to him. Originally, after Long Tian was killed by Hu Xinyue and the others, he had completely disappeared without a trace. The Enigma Grotto Heaven had ordered people to search for 2 months, but they still couldn't find any trace of Long Tian. Since then, the mysterious paradise had suspected that Long Tian's disappearance had something to do with the Myriad Demon Alliance. However, without concrete evidence, the Xuanji Grotto was not in a hurry to fall out with the Myriad Demon League. It wasn't until the Star-Devouring Paradise's incident that Xianxia sent a message that the Mystery Paradise confirmed their guess. That was the reason why the Heartless God King had appeared and attacked the Rahu God King. After understanding the crux of the matter, Luoho God King naturally harbored hatred and murderous intent towards the Xianxia clan and Xianxia. After this, the 10,000 Demon Alliance would definitely find an excuse and opportunity to punish the Xianxia clan. However, he had to get through this hurdle. What are you talking about? This seat doesn't understand. Divine King Rahu swept a cold glance at Divine King Heartless, his face filled with disdain. No matter what he thought in his heart, he could not admit it at this moment. The Heartless God King was thoroughly enraged and also lost his patience. He said with a hideous grin on his face, "Fine. Since Alliance Head Rahu insists on playing dumb, then don't blame this king for not being courteous." When his voice fell, he accumulated divine power frenziedly, his entire body bursting with shocking murderous intent. The 40 powerhouses of the Sky-Bearing sect also became nervous all of a sudden, gripping their swords and sabers tightly. As long as the Heartless God King gave the order, they would have to brace themselves and risk their lives. Divine King Rahu was still fearless. He cast a sidelong glance at the heartless God King and said with a cold smile, "Since the Enigma Grotto heaven is bent on falling out, then don't blame this seat for being ruthless. In the recent few hundred years, the Myriad Demon Alliance and the Enigma Grotto heaven maintained a certain balance. Although both sides predicted in their hearts that there would be a day where they would fall out and go to war sooner or later. However, this day clearly came too early. The heartless God King hesitated for a moment but was still unwilling to tarnish the Enigma Grotto heaven's reputation. Gnashing his teeth, he said, "You're a peak God King. This king is naturally not your match. But there are so many of us. Dealing with one incarnation of yours, I believe it should still be very easy." Without a doubt, Tianxia was able to tell that the Rahu God King was an avatar, so the heartless God King naturally could tell too. After all, he was a 9th stage realm God King. Furthermore, his strength was even stronger than Zhou Xian and Tao Yongxing. Since that's the case, then cut the crap. Let's see who's real. The Rahu God King gave a cold cry and suddenly attacked. His entire body burst forth with boundless lightning. Boom. Crack. He spread open both arms, his beard and hair fluttering. Millions of purple lightning surged out from his entire body, sweeping in all directions. The 40 people of the sky-bearing sect were just about to brandish their swords and sabers to surround and attack when they were drowned by the incoming lightning sea. Only to hear muffled bangs lingering on incessantly. Those 36 high-ranked divine lords were instantly turned into charcoal by the millions of lightning bolts. That was not ordinary lightning. That was a furious attack of a peak God King. Contained 200 kinds of laws and divine powers. Not only did the 36 divine lords perish on the spot, their divine bodies turning into pitch-black ashes and their divine sparks disintegrating. Even the few God Kings of the sky-bearing sect were struck by the lightning until they were covered in ash and charred black. Amidst a series of violent coughs, the few God Kings were sent flying tens of thousands of feet away, blood spurting out of their noses and mouths continuously. But the heartless God King was long prepared. He did not allow the lightning to get close to him at all and had already retreated hundreds of miles, disappearing into the sky. The next instant, without waiting for the lightning to spread out, the heartless God King appeared out of thin air behind the Rahu God King. In his hands, he had already grasped 2 pitch-black sharp curved blades and stabbed towards the Rahu God King with a tremendous force. More than 10 icy cold black lights with the aura of death locked onto the Rahu God King's vital points. The black lights were silent. They were neither dazzling nor did they have earth-shattering momentum or light shadows. But their power made the Rahu God King feel apprehensive. Evidently, the heartless God King with a cold and ruthless aura was not a mighty expert who faced steel head-on. Instead, he was a treacherous assassin who lurked in the darkness and pursued a one-hit kill. The Rahu God King had already expected this. Without waiting for the heartless God King's nomological divine powers to seal the space, he took a step forward. Swish. This step was 1,000 miles away. The sky-bearing sect experts who had yet to recover from their shock hurriedly chased after the Rahu God King when they lost sight of him. The heartless God King's assassination failed, and his figure disappeared once again. The next instant he also appeared 1,000 miles away, above the Rahu God King's head out of thin air, silently waving his blade to stab. This time the Rahu God King did not retreat. With a flip of his right hand, a pitch-black divine blade appeared and slashed at the heartless God King. The multicolored saber light suddenly bloomed, as dazzling as the scorching sun. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3708. Kaboom! The 5-colored saber light clashed with the black light of death, resulting in a thunderous explosion. The 2 saber lights shattered at the same time, scattering fragments of divine light everywhere. The heartless divine king's strength was ultimately a little weaker. He was sent flying on the spot. However, he disappeared in a flash of white light in midair. After failing 2 consecutive attacks, he was no longer in a hurry to attack. Instead, he hid himself and waited for a better opportunity. At this moment, the 8 divine kings of the sky-bearing sect had arrived. Ignoring their injuries, they brandished their weapons and launched a joint attack. Although they were weaker, they had the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, they occupied 8 positions in the universe. Their combined attack was not to be underestimated. Swish, swish, swish. The sky was filled with saber lights and sword shadows. the brilliance of divine techniques, and a sea of ice arrows and fire. All of them blasted toward the Luoho Divine King. The Luoho Divine King remained expressionless. His left palm struck out 4 palm shadows that transformed into 4 huge stars that emitted endless starlight. Bam, 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 bam. The attacks of the 8 divine kings were all blocked by the 4 dazzling stars. Amid the dull thuds, divine light scattered everywhere, illuminating a radius of 50,000 miles. The incomparably violent shockwave sent a few god kings flying. Naturally, it broke the battle formation of the 8 god kings. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Luoho Divine King brandished his pitch-black saber and slashed out more than 300 saber lights in an instant. Swish, swish, swish. Instantly, the sky within a radius of 20,000 miles was sliced into pieces by the saber lights. Among the 8 divine kings, 4 of them died on the spot, minced into pieces by the saber lights. The other 4 were also severely injured, including the sky-bearing sect's great guardian. All of them were sent flying with blood all over their bodies. At the same time, the heartless divine king who had been hiding in the dark, finally found an opportunity to strike. It was unknown how he had passed through the shattered space, but he had strangely appeared next to God King Rahu. His 2 scimitars slashed out soundlessly. The space was silently sliced apart. More than 180 types of divine power of laws sealed off the area and suppressed the Luoho Divine King. However, the Luoho Divine King remained calm as though he had expected the heartless Divine King to strike. Without even turning his head, he punched out with his left hand. Swish. There was no fist aura, but there was a pitch-black vortex that instantly grew to the size of a mountain and swallowed everything. This vortex was like a black hole. Whether it was the air, divine power, or light, everything was devoured. If the heartless God King did not stop, he would definitely be engulfed by the black hole. At this moment, a trace of hatred flashed through the heartless divine king's eyes. He unwillingly withdrew his hand and turned invisible again, retreating far away. God King Rahu did not give chase. Instead, he used his left arm to change the direction of his attack, sending the vortex towards the other 2. The 2 heavily injured divine kings of the sky-bearing sect were instantly swallowed by the vortex and disappeared. God King Rahu didn't even look at their fates. He brandished his saber and charged towards the remaining 2 god kings. The 2 lucky survivors were the Great Guardian and Great Elder of the sky-bearing sect. They were both 8th-degree realm divine kings. The 2 of them knew that they would not be able to escape unscathed. Thus, they became ruthless and did not hesitate to use a forbidden technique by harming themselves. He did not have any extravagant hopes of killing God King Rahu. He only hoped that he could stall for a moment and buy some time for God King Thoughtless. Fortunately, it worked. Even though God King Rahu was powerful, he was delayed by the 2 of them and was unable to kill them for the time being. This was the opportunity that the 2 God Kings exchanged their lives for God King Thoughtless. God King Thoughtless naturally would not miss this opportunity. He took the opportunity to launch a series of attacks. Each attack was more exquisite and dangerous than the previous. On the other hand, God King Rahu was like an indomitable giant mountain. He was methodical and unshakable from start to finish. Both parties clashed again and again. Time passed quietly. Even though the battle between the 2 top experts did not cause the mountains to crumble and the earth to split or the sun and moon to change their colors. In comparison, it was not as shocking as the 2 God Kings' ultimate techniques of the sky-bearing sect. However, the various techniques that God King Rahu and God King Thoughtless executed were all top remarkable ultimate techniques. Their strength, foundation, control of divine power and laws were also exquisite to the peak. It was breathtaking. The dangers involved were even more unimaginable. Finally, 100 breaths time passed. The Great Guardian and Great Elder's forbidden techniques gradually lost their effects and started to backfire on themselves. The 2 of them were already badly mutilated and in a wretched state. Their internal organs, meridians, and consciousness all suffered a backlash, causing their strength to plummet and their consciousness to blur. God King Rahu attacked calmly and decisively, killing the Great Elder of Sky-bearing sect quickly. Even though God King Thoughtless tried to stop him, it was useless. He was injured by God King Rahu and was sent flying. When God King Rahu finished off the Great Elder, he charged towards the Great Guardian. A ferocious look flashed across the eyes of the Great Guardian of Sky-bearing sect. He seemed to have made a decision. His eyes were filled with despair and determination. Zhoosh. Thus his entire body ignited with soaring blood fire. His divine body swelled and burned violently. A destructive power was brewing in his body and it was about to explode. Self-destruct. God King Rahu was shocked and his brows furrowed tightly. He did not expect that sky-bearing sect would be so reckless to do something for Xuanji Grotto Heaven. To think that sky-bearing sect would be so daring to suck up to Xuanji Grotto Heaven. Although the Great Guardian's strength did not pose a threat to him. But the Great Guardian self-destructed on the spot and he was too close. Even if he did not die from the explosion he would be severely injured. Therefore God King Rahu did not hesitate at all. He immediately slashed his saber across the sky and teleported away. Boom. Almost at the same time he stepped into the crack in space. The Great Guardian of Sky-bearing Sect's body swelled to the maximum and exploded. A dazzling 5-colored light exploded high in the sky and spread, illuminating a radius of 100,000 miles. That dazzling light was released violently and expanded to a radius of 100,000 miles in the blink of an eye. Thus, this radius of 100,000 miles was shattered and turned into a pitch-black void. Whether it was space, earth, mountains, divine energy or the corpses and weapons of those god kings, everything was blown into nothingness. The self-destruction of an 8th heaven realm god king was so terrifying. Of course, that terrifying 5-colored shockwave was much weaker after destroying a radius of 100,000 miles. However, it still continued to spread in all directions. Wherever the 5-colored light passed, the heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. All living beings were turned into ashes. Finally, the pitch-black cracks that filled the sky and the ravines that ran through the earth extended to a radius of 200,000 miles before everything ended. The 5-colored light gradually dissipated and returned to heaven and earth. The shattered and devastated space of 200,000 miles also gradually calmed down. The void of 100,000 miles caused by the self-destruction quickly healed under the will of the heavenly Tao. At the edge of the self-destruction area, God King Rahu stood on top of the clouds and gazed at the pitch-black void in the distance. He could not help but murmur. Xuanji Grotto Heaven's determination is really unexpected. After saying that, he could not help but cough and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. The previous battle and forcefully traversing through space to escape from the self-destruction area had injured him. Fortunately, it was only a minor injury. Chapter 3709. Compared to God King Luoho's light injuries, God King Wuxian's injuries were more tragic. At this moment he was also standing at the edge of the self-destruction zone. He was less than 10,000 feet away from the ravines and spatial cracks that filled the sky. Even the continuous mountain range behind him had been reduced to a pile of yellow soil and ruins. Sigh. The Dragon Emperor was too impatient. God King Wuxian's face was pale as he let out a long sigh. Then he used his sleeve to wipe away the blood on his face and circulated his energy to suppress the injuries in his body. His long robe was already in tatters. A large pile of blood-soaked rags fluttered in the wind. There were bloody holes on his chest and back. They were as long as chopsticks and were so deep that his bones could be seen. Divine blood was still gushing out of them. His divine power aura was naturally in a mess. Even his mind was tired. As he silently circulated his energy to heal his injuries, he stared into the distant void with lifeless eyes. He was thinking about other things. Within 1,000 years, 2 peak god kings have appeared on the continent. One of them even established the Myriad Demon Alliance, which shocked the Northwest. His Highness has been concerned about the outer region and has ignored worldly affairs for too long. Naturally, he does not know the severity of the situation. The current Starsource continent is not as easy to control as it was in the past. After muttering to himself, God King Wuxian turned and left, disappearing into the clear sky. This assassination attempt was also a test. Naturally, it ended in failure. Of course, from a certain perspective, it was not necessarily a failure. After this incident we have fallen out. I'm afraid it will be difficult to maintain the balance. God King Luoho muttered to himself as he watched the distant void heal and the clear sky appear again. Then he turned and left. After flying for a short distance he summoned the divine warship and drove it back. At this moment his consciousness detected that Ji Tianxing had pushed open the door of the secret chamber and was walking out. Seeing Ji Tianxing's calm expression and frown, God King Luoho knew that he already knew about what had happened. As expected, after a while, Ji Tianxing walked into the cabin of the divine worship and asked, "Injured?" Although he had been cultivating in seclusion in the divine tower in the secret chamber. But every once in a while he would leave the divine pagoda to investigate the situation outside. And God King Rahu did not wish for such trivial matters to disturb Ji Tianxing's cultivation. Encountering the heartless divine king's ambush was naturally a huge matter, but Ji Tianxing could not reveal himself. Seeing that Ji Tianxing's first question was not about the enemy but about his injuries, God King Rahu's heart warmed slightly. God King Rahu was silent. After a long while he nodded in agreement. Ji Tianxing continued, "Since the heartless God King dared to ambush you, you should have killed him. First, cut off one of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's arms. Then the Xuanji Grotto will have a much harder time dealing with the Thousand Demon Alliance." God King Rahu smiled bitterly and said, "If I really killed him, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor will probably go crazy and destroy the Thousand Demon Alliance at all costs. Moreover, the Heartless God King is the best assassin in this world. Although he is not as strong as me, he can still preserve his life. You also know that an assassin and an expert are two different things." Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with an indifferent expression, "To the people of the mortal domain, there is indeed a difference between an assassin and an expert. One is proficient in concealment and assassination, and is good at killing people at the smallest price. The other, on the other hand, is open and above-board, fighting force with force. In comparison, an assassin is indeed better at killing and escaping. However, this difference does not exist for godly monarchs and godly kings." God King Rahu fell silent and did not argue, as that was the truth. What godly monarchs and godly kings competed in was strength, foundation, the exquisiteness of their abilities, the number of laws they had grasped, and the ingenuity of their usage. The top assassin, the heartless God King, had grasped the various laws and abilities. In fact, he did not have more than Ji Tianxing and Rahu. If they were to compete in assassination techniques, Ji Tianxing might not lose to the heartless God King. However, the main reason why God King Rahu did not kill the heartless God King was because of the self-destruction of the sky-bearing sect's great guardian. The two were silent for a moment, then Ji Tianxing continued, "Forget it, there is no point in discussing this now. It's good that the heartless God King is not dead. I can kill him personally in the future to take revenge." God King Rahu nodded and asked, "Then what next? What are your plans, young master?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said with a playful tone, "Everything is ready. Naturally, I will return to the Thousand Demon City and conserve my energy. Only with stronger strength and sharper swords can I deal with the upcoming war." Chapter 37:10. For the rest of the day. On the way back to the Dark Water region, the divine worship was intercepted 3 more times. Fortunately, those interceptors were the lords of the various regions and factions. None of them were the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's right-hand men. Those ordinary god kings were no threat to God King Luoho at all. Every time the divine worship was intercepted, God King Luoho would personally take care of the audacious interceptors. Ji Tianxing remained in the divine worship and did not show himself. Of course, God King Luoho also remembered Ji Tianxing's instructions. After every battle, he would take away the godhead fragments and interspatial rings of the god kings. In his view, the young master was unwilling to take the resources of the Myriad Demon Alliance. That was why he cared about these spoils. This warmed his heart and made him even more determined to use the Myriad Demon Alliance's strength to protect the young master. At night, the divine worship finally returned to the Dark Water region. Although there were many God King experts hiding in the Dark Water region, trying to kill Long Tian, the Myriad Demon Alliance was the Myriad Demon Alliance's territory. However, the Dark Water realm was the headquarters of the 10,000 Demon Alliance. A day ago, Xianxia and a few elders led a large group of elites to eliminate all suspicious people around the Black Sea. From the capital city in the south of the Dark Water region all the way to the Myriad Demon City, countless Myriad Demon Alliance experts were hiding. Therefore, when Ji Tianxing and God King Luoho flew out of the capital city, Xianxia and a few elders received the news. God King Luoho took out the divine worship and continued flying toward the Myriad Demon City. The elders and experts of the Myriad Demon Alliance secretly escorted them all the way back. Late at night, the divine worship finally returned to the myriad demon city and disappeared into the depths of the luxurious palace. Young master, you only need to cultivate in peace. Leave everything else to me. God King Luoho sent Ji Tianxing into a secret room and said with a smile, I will do as you say and tighten the defenses. No matter how angry the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor is, as long as he is not crazy, he will not attack the myriad demon city by force. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and took out a jade scroll. He said, I want to forge a divine sword. I still lack 3 sets of materials. Although they are not the best, they are relatively rare. Please put in some effort and help me gather these materials. God King Rahu did not hesitate at all as he took the jade slip and said, Young master, don't worry. This old servant will get it done as soon as possible. After he finished speaking, he bowed and left the room. The door to the secret room slowly closed and the room fell into darkness. Only the divine stones on the surrounding walls shone with a faint light. The godhead fragments that were as translucent as jade and extremely hard as they were devoured and absorbed by him were releasing wisps of divine power that were continuously poured into the heaven-mending orb. After being purified by the heaven-mending pearl, the divine power of various attributes was converted into pure energy that was injected into his body and became his power. As time passed, his strength began to increase steadily. Every few days he would be able to refine a new divine Tao law from the quintessence fragment. Ji Tianxing was in seclusion in the distorted space of time and was not disturbed by anyone. However, the Thousand Demon City was not as peaceful as it was in the past. It was in a tense atmosphere. The leader of the alliance, Divine King Luoho, personally commanded the branches to withdraw their defenses and secretly transfer their assets. A few elders and a dozen heavenly kings led a large group of elite experts and were busy with different tasks. At the same time, the Thousand Demon City was under full martial law and prohibited its citizens from entering and leaving as they wished. Anyone who entered or left the Thousand Demon City had to go through a series of checks. Moreover, there were large groups of guards patrolling the Black Sea. Many experts were hiding in the dark. In short, the Black Sea with the Thousand Demon City as the center was under heavy guard. They could gather all their strength at any time to deal with any unexpected situation. Although the Thousand Demon Alliance's actions made the people of the Alliance slightly nervous and puzzled. However, the prestige of the Alliance Master and the various elders had long been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. Therefore, countless members of the Alliance could remain calm and carry out their orders loyally. As for the reason, it was not something they should consider. In addition to the changes in the Thousand Demon Alliance, the spies scattered everywhere also received countless reports. In just a few days, many powerful forces and Divine King experts had rushed to the Darkwater region from all directions. The Darkwater region was now filled with undercurrents and was extremely dangerous. Some of the smarter ones had already guessed that the forces and experts coming from all directions were naturally following the orders of the mysterious paradise. In short, they were all the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor's lackeys. The eagles and hounds came in a menacing manner and did not hide their intentions. That's right, they were all coming for the Thousand Demon Alliance. A question that had been suppressed in the bottom of their hearts for a long time, but was unwilling to think about it, once again filled the minds of the Thousand Demon Alliance members. The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. Is the mysterious Paradise's Dragon Emperor finally going to declare war on the Thousand Demon Alliance? Chapter 37:12. Heaven-Sealing Dragon Emperor has never accepted any disciples in his life. However, he made an exception and accepted Long Tian as his disciple more than 1,000 years ago. Hearing the heartless Divine King's report, the Gold Source Dragon Emperor frowned and muttered to himself. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked a question that seemed to be unrelated to the current situation. After Heaven-Sealing Dragon Emperor disappeared, where did his subordinates go? However, everyone present understood the meaning of this question. As such, the heartless Divine King, the Battle Dragon King, and Shueshang's pupils shrank as a strange look flashed across their eyes. The heartless Divine King's expression returned to normal as he replied respectfully. After Dark North took over the position of Dragon Emperor, he did not purge Heaven-Sealing Dragon Emperor's subordinates. After all, Dark North had a close relationship with the Heavenly Dragon Divine Palace and had always considered himself as Heaven-Sealing Dragon Emperor's junior. However, heaven-sealing dragon emperor was indifferent and did not care for power. He did not have many trusted subordinates. The generals and commanders guarding the divine palace, the heavenly dragon guards who patrolled the world, and the various territorial lords remained and pledged their loyalty to Dark North. The gold source dragon emperor frowned and thought for a moment before he asked coldly, I remember that heaven-sealing dragon emperor loved to travel the four seas and discuss Tao with those old dragons. The person who followed him was a skinny and gloomy old servant. The heartless divine king was stunned for a moment before he remembered this person. He quickly nodded and said, Indeed. However, that old servant was always quiet and did not have much of a presence. I had forgotten about him. That old servant was heaven-sealing dragon emperor's only trusted subordinate. His name was Ophiuchus, and it was said that he used to be an earth snake. Ha ha. The gold source dragon emperor suddenly laughed. His eyes were cold as the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. The heartless divine king and the battle dragon king vaguely guessed something. Their expressions changed drastically as they were filled with shock. Xianxia seemed to have understood something as well. However, he lowered his head silently and did not dare to show any changes in his expression. The gold source dragon emperor smiled and said, Both of you go. If it's really him, then everything makes sense. The battle dragon king suddenly sighed and said worriedly, However, if that's the case, then this is an unsolvable situation. I'm afraid that it will be difficult to resolve the situation and turn it into reality. Everyone present understood what this meant. The gold origin dragon monarch was furious. He personally issued an order and sent countless experts to the Dark Water realm to exert pressure on the Myriad Demon Alliance. Their purpose was nothing more than to beat the 10,000 Demon Alliance and weaken its power and authority. This was to remind the people that the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was the true master of this continent, and that the Myriad Demon Alliance would not be able to withstand a single blow. At the same time, the Xuanji Grotto wanted to kill Long Tian as an example to others. Kill this audacious maniac who had slaughtered all the domain masters to quell the discussions and panic of the people. However, if the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was right, the Myriad Demon Alliance would never hand over Long Tian. Since the Myriad Demon Alliance refused to obey, the Enigma Grotto could not leave with their tails between their legs. There would only be one outcome, and that was to turn the pretense into reality and start a real war. At the thought of this, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor frowned and his eyes flickered. He glanced at Xianxia and said, There's nothing for you to do here. You may leave. Xianxia's heart relaxed. He quickly bowed and prepared to leave. He also understood that the Dragon Emperor was discussing important matters with his confidants, and it was not suitable for him to listen. However, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor ordered, This matter started because of you. You will also go to the Dark Water realm and wait for my orders. Xianxia was stunned for a moment. He recalled the heavenly oath he had made back then, and a bitter expression appeared on his face. However, he could not say it out loud now. He could only accept the order with cupped fists. After Xianxia left, the study returned to silence. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor smiled coldly and said expressionlessly, This is just my guess. I sent the two of you to try to verify it. It would be best if the Myriad Demon Alliance could be forced to hand over Long Tian. If it is really as I guessed and the Myriad Demon Alliance is determined to be my enemy, then they will be eliminated. After all, the Rahu Divine King's true body is not here. It's just an avatar. The War Dragon King had always been in the war faction. He was good at leading troops in battle, unlike the heartless Divine King who was good at scheming and gathering information. Previously, he was worried that the conflict between the two tigers would harm the common people and shake the foundation of the Myriad Demon Alliance. However, since the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had made up his mind, he no longer had any worries. He bowed and said, Rest assured, Your Majesty. I will do my best and finish this in one fell swoop. If Xianxia was here, he would definitely be confused. Since the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor had decided to eliminate the Myriad Demon Alliance, why didn't he do it himself? The Rahu Divine King in the Myriad Demon City was just an avatar. Chapter 37:13. For 10 whole days, the northwest region of the Starsource continent was filled with tension. Many forces and god kings rushed over from all directions, entering the Dark Water domain and gathering around the Black Sea. Even though there might not be any connections or friendships between the various forces and experts, they all had the same goal. In these 10 days, many things happened that people didn't know or didn't know about. But everyone knew that the 10,000 Demon Alliance that had been controlling the Black Sea for many years was about to face a calamity. Because Xuanji Grotto Heaven's general manager Thoughtless God King and Martial War Dragon King had appeared at the Black Sea. This meant that Gold Origin Dragon Emperor had made up his mind to demand an explanation from the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Therefore the factions and God King experts became more confident and sharpened their weapons. But the 10,000 Demon Alliance's attitude was also very firm. Facing Xuanji Grotto Heaven's pressure and the encirclement of various factions and experts, the 10,000 Demon Alliance showed no signs of bowing down. Before the army arrived, the 10,000 Demon Alliance had already retracted their defenses and gathered countless experts to defend the 10,000 Demon City and the Black Sea. In just a few days, countless battles occurred at the Black Sea. According to incomplete statistics, there were more than 30 battles in the 10 days. At least 200 elite warriors of the Myriad Demon League and 9 King God Realm warriors died tragically under the siege of the other forces and experts. Of course, the various factions also suffered heavy losses and paid the price of more than 300 lives. The majority among them were Divine Lord Realm powerhouses, but there were also more than a dozen Divine King Realm powerhouses. In addition, Thoughtless God King and War Dragon King were in charge of the Black Sea. They had sent many experts who were good at hiding to infiltrate the 10,000 Demon City. But unfortunately, no matter what methods they used, they couldn't infiltrate the 10,000 Demon City and were all killed. After 10 days, Thoughtless God King and War Dragon King lost their patience and continued to confront the 10,000 Demon City. The two of them personally led more than 40 God King experts and thousands of Godlord experts to attack the 10,000 Demon City. In the end, the 10,000 Demon Alliance didn't give in and didn't admit to the crime of harboring Long Tian. Godly King Luoho personally led a few elders, more than 30 godly kings and more than 800 godly lords. They stood in formation outside Myriad Fey City and defended with all their might. The two sides negotiated for an hour, pointing fingers at each other. In the end, they failed to reach an agreement and could only fight to the death. This battle was the largest battle in the past 1,000 years, with the most number of experts involved. Those who were fortunate enough to participate in the great battle felt even more proud and arrogant. The various forces that did not participate in the battle were also very excited and expectant. The result did not disappoint the spectators. The Xuanji Grotto's side had the advantage in numbers. They charged forward valiantly as if they were determined to conquer the 1,000 Demon City. The 10,000 Demon Alliance, on the other hand, was united and resisting the enemy at all costs. This world-shaking and magnificent battle continued for an entire half a day. Dazzling 5-colored divine light illuminated the area within a radius of 100,000 miles. All kinds of dazzling lights and shadows, as well as a sky full of saber light and sword rain, also covered the entire Demon City, covering a radius of 50,000 miles. As the two sides fought fiercely, the shockwaves from the collision of divine skills turned into 5-colored ripples that spread out, stirring up the Black Sea and creating huge waves that were thousands of feet high. Such a tragic and shocking battle was a feast for the eyes of the spectators. It also made them tremble with fear as if their hearts were in their throats. This was because the battle was still difficult to determine the outcome of the battle. It was very anxious. The Xuanji Grotto's side had paid a heavy price, sacrificing hundreds of experts, but still failed to break through the 10,000 Demon Alliance's defense line. They had used all kinds of tactics and methods. However, godly King Luoho and the hundreds of experts of the 10,000 Demon Alliance did not back down. The defensive formation that covered Myriad Fey City also flashed with divine light, but it was still intact. Only when the blood-red sun set behind the mountains did the battle finally come to an end. As the attacking side, the Xuanji Grotto had naturally failed. They did not break through the defense line, nor did they kill their way into Myriad Fey City. They even paid the price of more than 600 lives. There were more than a dozen godly king experts among them. The Xuanji Grotto's side had suffered heavy losses. Even the heartless godly king and the battle dragon king were injured. However, the 10,000 Demon Alliance's outcome was also tragic. Not only were more than 400 experts killed, but more than 20 godly kings had also fallen in the battle. The 400 or so survivors were also severely injured. Their strength was weak and they were in a sorry state. From the number of casualties on both sides, the Xuanji Grotto should have lost and the 10,000 Demon Alliance should have won. However, in reality both sides could only be considered to be tied. The 10,000 Demon Alliance had it worse. After all, the Xuanji Grotto was attacking while the 10,000 Demon Alliance was defending. Even so, such a tragic and glorious result still shocked countless people. The various forces that had been summoned by the Xuanji Grotto to besiege the 10,000 Demon Alliance were all shocked by the strength of the 10,000 Demon Alliance. In the past they had only heard that the 10,000 Demon Alliance was extremely powerful, and could cover the sky with one hand. Today, after experiencing it personally, the various forces knew that this was true. Other than the Xuanji Grotto, the 10,000 Demon Alliance was the #1 force in the Starsource continent. Even the Sky-bearing sect, the Overlord of the South, could not be compared to the 10,000 Demon Alliance. This conclusion made the various forces secretly shocked. Their fighting spirit and spirit were thwarted, and they no longer dared to underestimate the 10,000 Demon Alliance, much less launch an attack. After the Heartless God King and the War Dragon King led everyone to retreat, the shore of the Black Sea regained its peace. The various forces that had been observing the battle and lying in ambush also obediently hid in the dark, continuing to maintain their silence. After nightfall, the 10,000 Demon City regained its peace as if nothing had happened. On the shore of the Black Sea, on a mountain peak 1,000 miles away from the sea, two figures stood on the mountain peak, blending into the night, quiet and cold. Halfway up the mountain there were more than 100 guards on guard. Among them there were more than a dozen godly king experts. Clearly, the two black-clothed experts on the mountain peak were of high status. These two were the Heartless God King and the War Dragon King. At this moment the two of them looked normal on the surface. However, their slightly pale faces, slight fluctuations, and slightly chaotic auras indicated that the two of them were injured. The two of them stood quietly on the mountain peak, looking in the direction of the Black Sea for a long time. Finally, the War Dragon King spoke first. In the end, we underestimated Luoho's strength and methods. In the battle during the day, the two of them did not participate in the killing of the soldiers. Their goal was to besiege the Luoho Divine King. The two of them originally thought that the Luoho Divine King was just an avatar. Even if they could not kill the Luoho Divine King with their combined attacks, they could severely injure him. However, reality shattered their confidence. The Luoho Divine King fought against two alone and still injured them, winning. The Heartless God King frowned and sighed. The stronger Luohos rebound, the more it proves our judgment that Long Tian is in the 10,000 Demon City. It's a pity that His Majesty, the Dragon Emperor, cannot take action personally. Otherwise, Luoho will definitely die. Chapter 37:14. At the same time, within the 1,000 Demon City, in the luxurious 1,000 Demon Divine Palace, in the same spacious and dignified study, there were 5 people in a meeting. Sitting on the large chair behind the desk was naturally God King Luoho. He had already regained his original appearance. He was a burly man with long purple-black hair. As for the other 4 God Kings, they were all standing respectfully in the study. These 4 people were all high-level divine kings, and in the great battle during the day, they had all suffered either light or heavy injuries. The leader was Great Elder Xianxia, followed by Second Elder, Third Elder Ao Jining and Fourth Elder. The 1,000 Demon Alliance had 7 elders, but these 4 were the most trusted and valued by God King Luoho. Although God King Luoho was deep in thought, he remained silent. The 4 elders' injuries were not light, but they endured their injuries without any impatience. They did not dare to make a sound for fear of disturbing God King Luoho. After a long while, God King Luoho said, "After this battle, this matter should be over." God King Heartless and War Dragon King joined forces, but they still could not enter the 1,000 Demon City. As long as the Gold Origin Dragon Emperor does not intervene, they have no chance of winning. Xianxia understood his meaning and asked in disbelief, "Alliance Master, it seems like we won today's battle, but it's actually a draw." Profound Grotto ordered the various factions to gather so many experts. How could they just give up like this? Third Elder Ao Jining also spoke, expressing his doubts. "Alliance Master, even if the various factions do not attack, they will definitely not let this matter rest. They will definitely find ways to harass and attack us. If this matter ends here and they leave just like that, wouldn't the Enigma Utopia lose all face? Second elder and fourth elder did not speak, but their thoughts were basically the same. God King Luoho smiled and said, "The Gold Origin Dragon Emperor is not a fool. He already predicted that the Thousand Demon Alliance would not be able to wipe them out in one fell swoop. Today's attack was just a test. If they could enter the Thousand Demon City, they would definitely take the opportunity to eradicate the Thousand Demon Alliance. But if the attack failed, they would have to retreat. This was because the Xuanji Grotto could afford to fail once and use other methods to regain their dignity in the future. However, they could not afford to lose face a second time. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor also knew that such a large army would only provoke the Myriad Demon Alliance to fight back with all their might. Compared to attacking a city, defending a city is naturally more advantageous. The Black Sea was the headquarters of the Myriad Demon League that had been operating for hundreds of years. If the Myriad Demon League were to defend the city, the Xuanji Grotto would have to send out double or even triple the forces to break the Myriad Demon City. Unfortunately, it was impossible for the Xuanji Wonderland to gather such a powerful force. Moreover, the Enigma Grotto did not have many direct descendants. Most of the divine kings came from all over the place. They were the leaders of various regions and forces. There were indeed a lot of them, but they were not as united as the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Seeing that the four elders had fallen silent and were mulling over his words, God King Luoho continued. Although we managed to defend Myriad Fiend City and repel the Profound Secrets Grotto's attack, we were still able to defend the Myriad Fiend City. However, this only made the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor even more certain that Long Tian was in the Myriad Demon City. Moreover, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor will also be determined to eliminate us. The four elders nodded to show that they understood. Hu Xinyue frowned and asked, "Alliance Master, what should we do next?" God King Luoho frowned and thought for a while. Then he instructed, "Remain vigilant and continue to patrol until all of their people have retreated. Although the Profound Secrets Grotto will not attack again, they will not retreat with their tails between their legs. My guess is that since they can't do anything to the Myriad Demon City, they will definitely destroy the Myriad Demon League's branches and peripheral industries. Whether it is to vent their anger or to vent their anger, they will definitely find some excuse." The second elder was in charge of the various branches and peripheral industries. He was immediately filled with worry and asked, "Alliance Master, should I immediately lead people to protect the various branches and industries?" "No need." God King Luoho waved his hand and said, "The Profound Secrets Grotto needs to vent their anger. If they want to destroy those branches and industries, then so be it. After all, we will be able to rebuild them in a few years. However, if you lead people to protect them, you will be spreading our strife. It is the same as sending people to their deaths." The second elder was filled with unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do. He could only sigh and say, "It is a pity that our time of development is too short. We cannot fight the Profound Secrets Grotto head-on. If we were given another 1,000 years, we might be able to overturn the Profound Secrets Grotto." God King Luoho smiled again and said patiently, "No, you are all wrong. You have to look further. The enmity between our league and the Profound Secrets Grotto must be determined. However, the key to victory does not lie in the number of forces and industries under our control. The true deciding factor is between the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and me." Chapter 37:15. In the next half a month, the Thousand Demon City was as stable as a mountain. Not only was the defensive formation activated, but there were also countless guards patrolling the area. There were even many spies, assassins, and guards around the Black Sea. The entire Myriad Demon Alliance was still in a tense state. There was not the slightest relaxation. The various factions that were waiting for orders around the Black Sea did not show themselves easily either. Although there were occasional conflicts between the two sides, it was only a small-scale battle. However, these were all small-scale battles and the number of casualties was not high, so it did not affect the overall situation. The situation was just as Divine King Luoho had guessed. After the defeat in that great battle, the Heartless Divine King and the Battle Dragon King ceased all activity and no longer launched a forceful attack. In half a month, the various factions and experts around the Black Sea also gradually retreated. After 15 days, the Heartless Divine King, the Battle Dragon King, and the Xuanji Grotto Heaven's direct disciples left silently. They did not return to the Xuanji Grotto Heaven directly. Instead, they went to the various regions in the northwest to carry out a mission. There was only one goal: to destroy the Thousand Demon Alliance's branches and take over the Thousand Demon Alliance's businesses. Even if they failed in their attack on the Thousand Demon City, they would not let the Thousand Demon Alliance off easy. This was to vent their anger and to maintain the Xuanji Grotto Heaven's reputation. The Gold Source Dragon Emperor had already predicted this outcome and had prepared an explanation. The Thousand Demon Alliance occupies the northwest. They do not care about the well-being of their people, but are selfish and have harmed the people of various races. They are the shame of the Starsource continent. The cruel and bloodthirsty Long Tian who killed the innocent should be judged by the Xuanji Grotto Heaven. However, the Thousand Demon Alliance did not care about their morals and reputation. They protected Long Tian, which is a heinous crime. However, the wise and mighty Dragon Emperor is kind and benevolent. Since the Thousand Demon Alliance has many members, it is not appropriate to treat them all the same and kill them all. Therefore, the Xuanji Grotto Heaven will destroy the Thousand Demon Alliance's branches and kill them as a punishment. I hope the Thousand Demon Alliance will take this as a warning and hand over Long Tian as soon as possible. Do not make a mistake. 5 days later, the Thousand Demon Alliance's 9 branches in 9 regions were all destroyed by the Xuanji Grotto Heaven's experts. More than 1,000 Alliance members and core members were killed by the Xuanji Grotto Heaven's experts. Chapter 37:16. God King Luoho was very patient. He reported everything that had happened to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was silent for a while after hearing the story. He stared at God King Luoho and asked, "If I hadn't appeared, the Myriad Demon Alliance wouldn't have suffered such a calamity. The Profound Secrets Grotto destroyed 9 of your branches. You won't blame me for that, will you?" God King Luoho hurriedly bowed and said sincerely, "Young master, you're exaggerating. The rise of the Myriad Demon Alliance threatened the position of Xuanji Grotto. Even if you hadn't appeared, Xuanji Grotto would have found an excuse to attack the Myriad Demon Alliance. I didn't have much ambition when I established the Myriad Demon Alliance. Now that you've returned, I'll naturally prioritize your safety. Some sacrifices are unavoidable." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and stared at God King Luoho. He asked, "You really don't have any ambition? Don't you want to use the Myriad Demon Alliance to defeat Xuanji Grotto and become the overlord of the Starsource continent?" God King Luoho looked straight at him without any change in expression. His eyes were clear without any pretense or concealment. He replied, "I'm already a peak God King and have established the Myriad Demon Alliance. Even though I've racked my brains and taken great risks to become the master of Xuanji Grotto and control the entire Starsource continent, actually there's not much change or improvement. Peak God King is already the limit of cultivation. No matter how much power and wealth I have, it's meaningless. The reason why I'm still in charge of the 10,000 Demon Alliance is that I want to provide a place for the sinners and the demons of low status. At the same time, this organization can work for me and investigate old masters' tracks and clues." God King Luoho's tone was calm, as if he had seen through everything. It seemed that when one reached his level, all glory, wealth and fame were like fleeting clouds. Ji Tianxing frowned and said, "Could it be that in the past 1,000 years, there hasn't been a single expert in the Dragon Realm who's surpassed the God King realm and reached the God Emperor realm?" "No," God King Luoho replied firmly. He then asked doubtfully, "God Emperor realm? What realm is that? Is there a whole new realm above the Divine King realm?" Ji Tianxing nodded and explained, "The realm above Divine King, I'm also not clear on how profound it is. However, there are a few people who broke through the Divine King realm and reached that realm. They call themselves the God Emperor realm." Luoho God King's eyes lit up with hope and shock. He asked, "Is this true?" Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and said seriously, "I haven't seen them yet, so I can't be sure. But according to my deduction, it should be 80% credible." The Rahu Divine King's eyes grew brighter and brighter as he asked, "The Dragon Realm doesn't have such a powerhouse. The God Emperor you speak of should be a powerhouse from the God Realm, right?" "Yes." Ji Tianxing nodded and asked again, "Why were there 5 God Emperors in the God Realm and none in the Dragon Realm in the past 1,000 years? Logically speaking, the many races in the Dragon Realm shouldn't be weaker than the God race, right?" The light in Luoho God King's eyes dimmed and he smiled bitterly. He nodded and said, Young master's question is also the target of this old servant's investigation and research for the past few hundred years. At the same time, this is also the matter that the peak god kings of the dragon realm are most helpless and resentful about. Then have you found anything after several hundred years of investigation? Luoho God King nodded and said in a low voice, I have some clues. This old servant is 80% sure that this matter is caused by heavenly sin. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and asked, Heavenly sin? The sinners you speak of. I wonder how they offended the heavens and were punished and shackled, unable to surpass the divine king realm? Luoho God King nodded solemnly and said, At present, this old servant has investigated more than 30 races, all sinners punished by heavenly sin. I don't know how many sinners have gone extinct or have yet to be investigated. The sinners are led by the dragon race, the phoenix race and the Qilan race. There are also a few of the 7 noble clans of the monster race, including the Xianxia race and the Taotai race. Ji Tianxing nodded and indicated for him to continue. Luoho God King continued to explain, the phoenix race and the Qilan race's reproductive abilities are not as good as the dragon races. Early in the ancient era, their numbers were not as great as the dragon races. After being punished by heavenly sin, the phoenix race and the Qilan race rapidly weakened and their numbers plummeted. Today it is difficult to find traces of the phoenix race and the Qilan race in the world. Only the dragon race, with their large numbers and powerful reproductive abilities, can continue to this day and still control the dragon realm. As for the other sinners, they can't even protect themselves and are gradually going extinct, not to mention surpassing the divine king realm. After Ji Tianxing heard this, he frowned and pondered for a moment. Then he stretched out 2 fingers and said, Your analysis is very reasonable. The sinful clan should be true. However, I have 2 questions. First, the sinners who offended heavenly sin are shackled and punished by heavenly Tao, unable to surpass the divine king realm. What about the other races? They are not sinners, so why hasn't anyone surpassed the divine king realm since ancient times? Second, why hasn't there been a single god emperor in the dragon realm, but 5 have appeared in the god realm? Chapter 37:18. Ji Tianxing put the last batch of metals and godstones into his spatial ring and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Yank pulled him back. Young master, please wait. Ji Tianxing turned to look at him. Seeing his anxious yet hesitant appearance, he couldn't help but frown. What's wrong? If you have something to say, just say it. Yank scratched his head and said somewhat embarrassedly, Young master, did you forget? You promised me that after I finished refining these ores. Ji Tianxing only remembered after Yank's reminder. He smiled and said, Oh, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. That's right, I said that I would introduce some friends to you after you finished refining the ores. Friends? Yank's eyes widened. Thinking of his previous guess, he immediately became excited and even more anxious. Ji Tianxing smiled. He took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and opened the Sword World. Follow me. Afterward, he brought Yank into the Sword World and landed in peaceful Earth City. After countless years of development, peaceful Earth City had become a majestic city with a radius of 50 kilometers. The craftsmen of the Earth Spirit race poured in their blood, sweat, and tears to build this city into a magnificent, majestic, and dignified city. Although it could not compare to the cities of the Dragon Realm or the God Realm, it was already one of the most majestic cities in the mortal world. After so many years of reproduction, the original population of several thousand Earth Spirit race citizens had increased by more than 100 times. Ji Tianxing scanned the city with his spiritual sense and discovered that there were more than 800,000 Earth spirits living in peaceful Earth City. With peaceful Soil City as the center, there were many smaller cities and small towns in the surrounding mountains and ridges. If the scattered Earth spirits were added together, there would probably be more than 1 million of them. Even more delightful was that besides the Earth Spirit race, more than 20 other races had been born in the Sword World. Even though they were all demonic beasts, they lived in peace with the Earth Spirit race and interacted with each other. The atmosphere was very harmonious. Under the command of the Gold Mountain King, the Earth Spirit clan selflessly helped those monsters, teaching them how to read, count, weave, and smelt. Earth Spirit craftsmen had even helped them build towns and cities, and weave armors, weapons, and other tools. After all, the Sword World was extremely vast. It had already expanded to a radius of tens of millions of miles. Countless creatures were born from it, including all kinds of birds and beasts. The current sword world was already a real world. Ji Tianxing believed that in a few hundred or a few thousand years, this world would give birth to even more living beings, and it would become even more prosperous. No matter how pure and profound his divine power was, it could not withstand such consumption. His godly power had been reduced by nearly half, and his face had turned pale. His forehead was filled with exhaustion. However, once the refinement began, it could not be stopped. Otherwise, it would affect the success or failure of the refinement process. Thus he could only take out a large number of divine pills, divine stones and origin stones. As he refined the weapons, he devoured these resources to recover his divine power. Another half a year passed before the work was completed. The 30-meter-long ugly sword embryo finally shrunk to 30-meter long, and its outer appearance returned to normal. The blade was still straight and sharp, neither wide nor narrow. It was completely black, mysterious and domineering. In the past year and a half, Ji Tianxing had not only tempered the sword embryo, but also sorted out and adjusted the internal structure of the sword embryo at the deepest level. Every grain of metal and every trace of pattern had reached the most perfect state. This way, the burial of heaven sword could absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth without any hindrance, transmit divine power and the power of laws without any loss. On the surface, the burial of heaven sword looked completely new, and its material had also been greatly improved. However, it still only had 300 laws and 3,000 restrictions. It was still a mediocre king-level divine artifact. Thus, before the refinement was complete, Ji Tianxing could not rest. Next was the most important step of the refinement process. He added divine Tao laws to the burial of heaven sword and inscribed divine spell restrictions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The burial of heaven sword floated in the 9 heavens cauldron, enveloped by surging divine fire. Ji Tianxing formed hand seals with both hands, constantly sending out beams of 5-colored divine light into the 9 heavens cauldron to attach to the burial of heaven sword. As time passed, one after another, divine Tao patterns and divine spell restrictions fused into the body of the burial of heaven sword. This process was even slower and the time it took was even longer. Moreover, Ji Tianxing's mental exhaustion was even greater, and the weariness between his brows was even thicker. However, with his strong willpower, he gritted his teeth and persisted. 1 month, 3 months, half a year. Unknowingly, another 3 years passed. Up until now, the refinement of the burial of heaven sword had already taken 6 years. The number of divine Tao patterns on the burial of heaven sword had reached 750, and the number of divine spell restrictions had also reached as many as 7,500. Logically speaking, Ji Tianxing had only mastered 750 types of divine Tao laws, and this was already his limit. The power of the burial of heaven sword had increased by several times, surpassing mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts and very close to high-grade king-grade divine artifacts. However, the burial of heaven sword still had not become a high-grade king-grade divine artifact. This was because a high-grade king-grade divine artifact contained 900 types of divine Tao patterns and 9,000 types of divine spell restrictions. Was the refinement going to fail just like that? Ji Tianxing stopped and rested for a few days, quickly recovering his divine power. At the same time, he was also deliberating and considering. After spending so much effort and time, how can I give up halfway? I haven't mastered 900 types of divine Tao laws yet, and I'm forcibly refining the burial of heaven sword. If I want the burial of heaven sword to become a high-grade king-grade divine artifact, I can only use that method. With this thought in mind, Ji Tianxing made up his mind. His divine power and mental state recovered a little, so he continued to cast spells, superimposing divine Tao patterns and divine Tao patterns on the burial of heaven sword. Without a doubt, these divine Tao patterns and divine Tao patterns were all cast by him previously. He had only mastered 750 types of divine Tao laws, but the burial of heaven sword needed 900 divine Tao patterns to become a high-grade king-grade divine artifact. Therefore, he could only repeatedly superimpose 150 types of divine Tao laws to make up for the 900. By doing this, even if the burial of heaven sword became a high-grade king-grade divine artifact, its power would be reduced. However, the 150 types of divine Tao laws he chose were all of the highest grade and strongest power. In this way, even if the power of the Burial of Heaven sword was reduced, it would not be affected too much. Moreover, all the high-grade god kings in the entire god realm and the dragon realm did this. After all, only those peak god kings could master 900 types of divine Tao laws. For an ordinary upper divine king to forge a king-grade high-grade divine artifact on his own, it would be a pipe dream. Therefore, those god kings thought of two ways to solve this problem. The first was to superimpose many repetitive divine Tao laws. Even if its power was greatly reduced, it would still be a high-grade king-grade divine artifact, much stronger than a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. The second way was a few high-grade god kings joining forces to refine the divine artifact. Everyone had mastered different divine Tao laws. If a few people joined forces to refine the divine artifact, they might be able to gather 900 different types of divine Tao laws and refine a true high-grade king-grade divine artifact. Xianxia spent 11 years in the distorted space-time. Only 2 months had passed in the outside world. In these 2 months, peace and tranquility had returned to the Star Source continent. It seemed that the influence of Long Tian and the Myriad Demon Alliance had gradually subsided. The battle between the Mystical Grotto and the Myriad Demon Alliance had temporarily come to an end. It would not erupt again in the short term. Countless factions and God King powerhouses were all discussing in secret. Many people knew that the Mystical Grotto had suffered a loss and lost face. They were just temporarily swallowing their anger. In the near future, when the Mystical Grotto had enough confidence, they would definitely make a comeback and teach the Myriad Demon Alliance a painful lesson. At that time, the real battle would begin. Even the powerhouses of the various factions could think of this. The upper echelons of the Myriad Demon Alliance naturally knew. Many elders, heavenly kings, and branch lords were tense. While working hard to grow stronger, they were also wary of the Mystical Grotto's possible revenge. Of course, the search mission given by the Alliance Lord was still ongoing. Ao Jinying and the Myriad Demon Alliance's spies had expended a lot of effort. They had even paid with many lives. A few months had passed. Until yesterday, when Ao Jinying and the spies' efforts finally paid off. A piece of top-secret news was sent back to the Myriad Demon City through the Myriad Demon Alliance's secret channel. Not long after, the special jade slip appeared in the Alliance Lord's study. At this time it was late at night. The study was heavily guarded, but the study was brightly lit. The purple-robed godly King Luoho was sitting in a large chair behind the desk. He stared at the jade slip silently. The gray-robed Ao Jinying stood in front of the desk with his hands by his side, waiting for the Alliance Lord's decision. After a long while, godly King Luoho put down the jade slip. He stared at Ao Jinying and asked calmly, "Is this news reliable?" Ao Jinying nodded without hesitation and replied, "Chief, this is the information that my 3 elite squads have gathered after spending more than a month's time. Moreover, the process was very complicated. After many layers of investigation, we were able to confirm that this news is true." Only then did godly King Luoho nod. "I naturally have confidence in your ability to handle matters. However, to receive such news during this special period, I can't help but suspect that this is a trap." Chapter 37:21. Ao Jinying remained silent. He had worked so hard to find this piece of information. It was definitely great news for the Alliance Master and Young Master. However, the Alliance Master was not happy at all. He was even a little suspicious. He understood that the Alliance Master had always been cautious, which was why he was so paranoid. However, he had confidence in his subordinates, so he explained, "Alliance Master, we have been carrying out this mission in secret. Even my elite agents are not clear about the situation. However, the information we found, regardless of identity or time, matches perfectly. I believe that there is no problem with this information." Seeing him so confident, God King Luoho nodded slightly and said, "All right, you may leave." Ao Jinying bowed, turned and left the study. Not long after, God King Luoho also stood up and left. He personally went to Xianxia's secret room. Whoosh. Xianxia, who was cultivating in the distorted spacetime, heard that someone was knocking on his door and left the distorted spacetime. When he opened the door to the secret room and saw God King Luoho, He could not help but be stunned. "Why are you knocking on my door personally? Did something big happen?" God King Luoho bowed and said with a smile, "There is indeed something important. There is finally news about the matter that young master asked me to investigate." "Really?" Ji Tianxing understood what he meant. His eyes lit up and his heartbeat quickened. "Let's talk in the study." God King Luoho gestured for him to enter. And so, master and servant went to the study and discussed the matter under the protection of the divine formation. After entering the study, God King Luoho stood to the side and handed a jade slip to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing eagerly took the jade slip and read the information inside with his divine sense. 13 years ago, a foreign race youth appeared in profound paradise. However, very few people have seen him. A short month later, the alien youth disappeared, never to appear in the Enigma Grotto again. After many layers of investigation, we found that profound paradise secretly sent that foreign race youth away and imprisoned him in the Milky Way zone's Milky Way secret realm. This information was very short. However, after Ji Tianxing finished reading it, he was very excited. His face was full of joy and excitement. He looked at God King Rahu with shining eyes and asked, "Where did this news come from? Can it be trusted?" God King Rahu nodded. "This is the information that Ao Jinying and his elite agents and spies spent 3 months to obtain after much investigation and analysis. Even with a target in mind, the 3 elite squads under his command still took more than a month to figure out the ins and outs of the matter. This old servant has confirmed with Ao Jinying that this news is credible." Chapter 37-22. Divine King Luoho moved very quickly. In just one day he had gathered a large number of experts and made arrangements for the follow-up. He could take away a group of powerful divine kings to assist Ji Tianxing in exploring the Sky River mystic realm and rescuing Ji Wuhan. He could also leave behind enough people to guard Myriad Demon City and prevent Mysterious Grotto from taking the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Most importantly, Divine King Luoho was extremely secretive when dealing with this matter. Apart from a few elders and his trusted aides, no one knew what he was going to do. The next night, when everything was quiet, Divine King Luoho was ready and gathered his men in the hall. Ji Tianxing received the news and rushed to meet up with the group. Stepping into the hall, he saw Divine King Luoho standing at the front with more than 30 figures behind him. His gaze swept over and saw a few familiar faces. Great Elder Hu Xinyue, 3rd Elder Ao Jinying, 4th Elder and 5th Elder. Apart from them, the other 30 people were dressed in pitch-black armor and wore masks that only revealed their eyes. These people were all high divine lords and all had gloomy auras. They were clearly well-trained elite guards. Ji Tianxing retracted his gaze and looked at Divine King Luoho. He transmitted his voice and asked, "If we take away so many people, won't Myriad Demon City's defenses be empty?" Divine King Luoho shook his head and explained, "There's 2nd Elder overseeing the 12 heavenly kings patrolling and hundreds of elite guards. In addition, the left and right protectors have always been hiding in Myriad Demon City and rarely show themselves. They're also a formless deterrent. Even if Mysterious Grotto takes the opportunity to attack, they won't be able to gain anything." Ji Tianxing finally understood that Divine King Luoho had indeed made sufficient preparations. Especially the left and right protectors hidden in the dark. Even he had never seen them before. They were truly well hidden and could be used as trump cards. "Since you've already made arrangements, let's not delay. Let's set off." Seeing Divine King Luoho's confident appearance, Ji Tianxing no longer tried to persuade him and gave the order to set off. Thus, Divine King Luoho took out the divine ship and led everyone onto it, flying out of the spacious hall. Swoosh! The divine ship left the hall and rushed into the darkness of the night, heading north as fast as lightning. The Tianhe region was located in the northeast of the Dark Water region. There were 2 regions between the 2 regions, and it was estimated that they would arrive in one day. The Xuanji Utopia was in the middle of the continent, while the Milky Way zone was in the north of the continent, within the sight of the Myriad Demon Alliance. Simply put, the Tianhe region was very far away from the Xuanji Grotto. The Myriad Demon League's control over the Tianhe zone was even stronger than that of the Xuanji Utopia. It was for this reason that God King Rahu and Ji Tianxing dared to take this risk. They weren't afraid that this was a scheme of the mysterious paradise. While the divine worship was on its way, Zhou Xian and the other elders were meditating in a secret chamber to prepare for the upcoming battle. The 30 elite guards were silent as well. They sat cross-legged quietly in the hall and circulated their cultivation techniques to regulate their breathing and conserve their energy. As for Ji Tianxing and God King Rahu, they were both in the cockpit. God King Rahu was currently telling Ji Tianxing about the Milky Way zone and the Milky Way mystic realm. This was because he knew that the young master had been more active in other continents than in the Starsource continent. The young master wasn't very familiar with the situation in the Starsource continent. The Milky Way zone's status and environment isn't outstanding among the various regions in the north. It's even slightly ordinary and not eye-catching. However, the existence of the Milky Way mystic realm made the Milky Way zone one of the most important regions in the north. Almost every year, a large number of godly lords and a few godly kings would enter the Milky Way mystic realm to explore the ruins and search for possible treasures. The Milky Way mystic realm is one of the few remaining mystic realms in the Starsource continent. It's second only to the Blessed Enclave for cultivation. It's rich in divine power and resources. However, the Milky Way mystic realm is very dangerous. There are some areas that even godly kings don't dare to enter easily. As a result, the Milky Way mystic realm has become an ownerless land. God King Rahu spoke calmly as Ji Tianxing listened quietly. Ji Tianxing gradually understood the situation in the Milky Way mystic realm. He also had a certain level of prediction and preparation for the upcoming danger. At the same time, the Milky Way zone outside the capital of a certain empire. At the peak of a lofty mountain, there was a simple and unadorned palace. It was quiet and quiet. From the outside, this ancient palace seemed to have been abandoned for many years. There was no sign of life. However, in reality, the palace was heavily guarded both inside and outside. This was especially so inside the palace. There were many godly kings in the most secretive underground palace and secret chamber. At this moment, a middle-aged man from the dragon tribe wearing a bright yellow robe and a luxurious crown was sitting in a dark secret chamber with his eyes closed. Creak, creak, creak. The stone door of the secret chamber opened. A skinny man from the Golden Crow tribe wearing golden armor walked quickly into the secret chamber. This man was the general manager of the mysterious grotto heaven, the Heartless God King. Chapter 37-23. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not know how to answer the Heartless Divine King's question. No one would believe that a peak Divine King would be someone's servant. Moreover, this peak Divine King had established a huge force like the Myriad Demon Alliance. The relationship between master and servant was a joke in front of a peak Divine King. If the Heartless Divine King became a peak Divine King, he would not be the general manager of the mystical grotto heaven and would not care about the relationship between master and servant. He would definitely become a king and establish a powerful force to compete for the position of overlord of the continent. If the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor still wanted to oppress and control him, he would rather kill the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and take over the position of overlord. Of course, both he and the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor knew about this and would not say it out loud. After a moment of silence, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor said in a low voice, "From the current situation, Luo Ho is indeed a servant and is willing to work for Long Tian. There are only two possibilities. First, he is extremely loyal and will not change his mind once he recognizes his master. The second possibility is that he has ulterior motives and is hiding very deeply. He must have an even more shocking plan." The Heartless Divine King fell silent. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor stood up and walked out of the secret chamber. "Let's go, we should also make a move." The Heartless Divine King quickly followed and advised with a smile, "They will need at least a day to travel from the Myriad Demon City to the Sky River Secret Realm. We only need 8 hours. Your Majesty, there is no need to be anxious." The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not even turn his head and said indifferently, "If we go early, we can also make arrangements early and avoid any mistakes. After 1,000 years, this is the first time I show myself. I have to be more careful. We can only succeed in this operation. We cannot fail." The Heartless Divine King quickly nodded and said with a smile, "Your Majesty is right. I have already prepared carefully for 2 months. There will not be any mistakes. Moreover, Long Tian is likely to follow Luo Ho to the Sky River Secret Realm. At that time we can kill them all. Even if Long Tian is not with us, we can still kill Luo Ho. Without Luo Ho, the myriad demon alliance will be like a pile of loose sand and will be destroyed in an instant. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not say anything. His lips curled upward into a cold grin as if he had a well-thought-out plan. A day passed quickly. There were 2 regions between the Demon City and the Sky River Mystic Realm. However, the 2 domains were basically under the control of the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Many empires were attached to the 10,000 Demon Alliance. Luo Ho God King hurried on his divine battleship and used the teleportation arrays of the various capital cities. Finally, late at night he arrived at the Milky Way Mystic Realm. There was no moon tonight and the sky was as dark as ink. Faint specks of starlight could be seen, but they were extremely dim. In front of the divine warship was a boundless stretch of lofty mountains and precipitous ridges. They were faintly discernible under the night sky and only black shadows could be seen. The mountains here were very steep with many cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Clouds and mist filled the air. The mountains were lush with greenery, and the boundless primeval forest seemed to have been untouched for tens of thousands of years. It was unknown how many birds and beasts lived in this uninhabited mountain range. Ji Tianxing used his divine sense to scan and discovered that celestial deity realm demonic beasts and fierce beasts could be seen everywhere in the mountain range. Even divine lord realm beast kings also frequently discovered them. Such a dangerous place, unless one was a divine king powerhouse, one absolutely would not dare to rashly enter. The entrance to the Sky River secret realm was in the depths of the mountains. Not to mention that the entrance to the secret realm was hidden, and it was difficult for ordinary people to find it. Just the dangers of the mountains and precipitous ridges alone were enough to deter 99% of explorers. And the very few who could find the entrance and enter the Sky River secret realm were all divine king powerhouses. Luo Ho God King steered the divine battleship, slowed down and concealed the tracks and aura of the divine battleship. They began to approach a certain mountain peak. Young master, we're almost there. Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a frown, the Sky River secret realm is isolated from the rest of the world and is extremely dangerous. However, many divine kings enter to explore every year. If Wuhan was really rescued by the Golden Dragon Emperor, why would it imprison Wuhan here? Logically speaking, the Golden Dragon Emperor doesn't know me or Wuhan's identity, so it shouldn't go through so much trouble. Previously, when he heard news of Wuhan and her whereabouts, he was filled with excitement. Now that 2 days had passed, his mood had calmed down, and he gradually felt that something was wrong. There were many suspicious points in this matter, and they could not withstand scrutiny. Luo Ho God King understood what he meant and said, I understand what you mean, young master. You suspect that this is a trap set by the Golden Dragon Emperor. However, you also said that as long as there's news of Little Mistress, even if it's just a glimmer of hope, you can't miss it. Moreover, Little Mistress's bloodline and background are extraordinary. Perhaps the Golden Dragon Emperor has other thoughts and plans. No matter what, we're already here, so we have to go in and take a look. Ji Tianxing thought about it and agreed with Luo Ho God King's words. He nodded and said, yes, be careful. Soon the divine battleship landed on the peak of a lone mountain. This black and gray mountain was more than 3,000 feet tall, but it only had a radius of a few dozen miles. It was like a giant sword that pierced through the sky and clouds, standing between heaven and earth, aloof from the world. The lone mountain was surrounded by almost perfectly straight cliffs. There was not a single blade of grass growing on the mountain peak and cliffs. Even birds would not be willing to stop by. Ji Tianxing used his divine sense to scan the mountain peak and discovered that it was not made of ordinary earth and rocks, but of extremely hard special ores. He thought to himself, no wonder this lone mountain is so special. Even the traces of the vicissitudes of life are so faint. Swoosh! The divine battleship landed silently on the mountain peak, still invisible. The mountain peak was not flat. It was full of potholes and craggy boulders. There were signs of swords and axes everywhere. It was obvious that many powerful cultivators had fought here over the years. In the middle of the empty mountain peak, there was a fortress made of black boulders. From afar it looked like a crude fortress. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that it was an ugly and primitive sacrificial altar array. There was no beauty in it, and it did not have the majesty of a divine array. However, that sacrificial altar array was the entrance to the heavenly river mystic realm. Around the sacrificial altar array, there were more than 30 divine lord experts standing guard. They were clad in armor and wielding swords. In the darkness of the night, there were also 4 divine king experts hiding on the mountain peak and on the ground. These demons came from different races. Their strength, aura, and appearance were all different. It was difficult to tell which force they came from. However, Ji Tianxing and Divine King Luoho both knew that these were from the mysterious grotto heaven. Why are these people standing guard here so openly? Was it like this before? Ji Tianxing frowned and became even more suspicious. Divine King Luoho nodded and said, "It has always been like this. More than 50 years ago, the mysterious grotto heaven sent a group of experts to guard this place. Even the governor of the Tianhe zone had to send people to guard and protect this place. Back then, countless adventurers entered the heavenly river mystic realm to explore and search for treasures. However, since then this place has become the property of the mysterious grotto heaven. Only their people explore the mystic realm." End of chapter. Chapter 37-24. Divine King Luoho's explanation calmed Ji Tianxing down a little. He had suspected that this was a trap set up by the abstruse grotto heaven to lure him here and ambush him. But now it seemed that he had been overthinking. No matter how cunning the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor was, he could not have set up this trap more than 50 years ago. Moreover, the guards guarding the mystic realm's entrance were not very strong. More than 30 god lords and 4 lower god kings could only guard against ordinary adventurers. Trying to deal with the 10,000 demon alliance was no different from courting death. Let's not waste any time. Let's do it. Ji Tianxing made a decision. Divine King Luoho nodded and immediately used a mystic art to release an invisible divine spirit energy that was transmitted through the divine ship. Swish, 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 swish. Instantly, tens of thousands of divine spirit energy spread out and silently enveloped the mountain peak. In the next instant, that invisible divine soul power imprisoned more than 30 divine lord realm experts. Before they could react or resist, their godheads were crushed and their lives were cut off. Thump, thump. One after another, the armored divine lord masters quietly fell around the altar array, emitting faint thuds as they did so. At this moment, the 4 lower god kings who had been hiding underground all this time sensed something amiss. The 4 of them were filled with fear. They turned into streaks of light and green smoke or concealed themselves as they flew out from underground. But just as they flew to the surface and saw the dead experts, they felt a piercing pain in their spiritual sea. Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of invisible divine spirit energy tightly wrapped around them and ruthlessly crushed their godheads. The 4 lower god kings also died on the spot. His body, which did not seem to be injured at all, fell to the ground powerlessly with a soft thud. Just like that, Divine King Luoho easily dealt with the guards at the entrance. He cautiously released his divine sense and scanned the area around the mountain peak. After confirming that no one was hiding in the dark, he flew out of the divine ship. Swish, swish. Everyone else remained in the divine ship. He and Ji Tianxing left the divine ship and went to the sacrificial altar array. The 2 of them stared at the ground, carefully observing the ancient patterns on the boulder and silently pondered. About 7 minutes later, God King Rahu was able to make some headway. He had vaguely found a way to resolve this. This is a king-grade high-grade divine array. It has a history of over 10,000 years, but after being repaired and improved by later generations, its power has obviously increased by a lot. God King Rahu analyzed the array before him and sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. "Young master, please wait for a moment." It broke through the white-robed young man's protective light and sent him flying back. While he was still tumbling in the air, half of the white-robed youth's sleeve had already been blown away by the wind. His entire right arm had been chopped off, and the severed arm fell to the ground with a mixture of blood and water. He flew back 1,000 feet and crashed into the edge of the ceiling formation before falling to the ground with a thud. With just one move, Ji Tianxing had injured the white-robed youth. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, But in reality, it had happened in the blink of an eye. The white-robed youth knew that his assassination had failed and that he was no match for Ji Tianqing in a direct confrontation. He got up without hesitation and fled through the gap in the formation. At the same time, God King Rahu, who was outside the ceiling formation, also saw the situation inside the formation and understood that this was a trap. He brandished his dual sabers and injured the two God Kings, forcing them to retreat. Then he shouted to Ji Tianqing, who was inside the formation, "Young master, this is the Golden Dragon Emperor's trap. Retreat quickly." Ji Tianqing naturally knew this. When he saw the white-robed youth fly out of the formation without regard for his injuries, he quickly chased after him. Swoosh! The gap in the ceiling formation quickly closed and was about to be restored to its original state. With a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing passed through the gap and escaped the ceiling formation. When he arrived in the sky outside the formation, he and God King Rahu no longer lingered in the battle. They waved their swords and forced the two God Kings back before flying into the distance. But at this moment, dozens of divine lights lit up in the sky in all directions. Swish, swish, swish. Streaks of light streaked across the sky like lightning and instantly surrounded the mountain peak, forming a circle. Ji Tianqing and God King Rahu could only stop in their tracks. They stood high in the sky and looked at the experts around them. They saw that there were as many as 37 experts in the sky. Including the two God Kings guarding the mountain peak and the white-robed youth, there were exactly 40 of them. And these 40 Fey experts of different forms and races were all godly kings. Most of them were mid-level God Kings, and the weakest had the strength of a 4th-degree God King. And the strongest were naturally peak God Kings. "Ah, Rahu, I have long heard of your name and deeds. Today I finally get to meet you." There was a burst of laughter from the crowd. Then a man from the Dragon clan wearing a bright yellow divine robe and a luxurious crown walked out under the protection of a few experts. This burly man from the Dragon tribe was none other than the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor. Chapter 37:27. In fact, there were some loopholes and suspicious points in this scheme and plan. But overall it was still considered quite thorough and there were no obvious loopholes. Most importantly, Ji Tianqing urgently wanted to find his son Ji Wuhan. As long as there was a clue or hope, he would not give up. Even if he had to take the risk and fall into a trap, he did not care. Now it was proven that this was really the Gold Source Dragon Emperor's scheme. Both he and the Luoho Divine King had fallen into it. But he was very calm. He was not angry, upset, or blaming himself, because he had already mentally prepared himself to fall into a trap. The Luoho Divine King was the same. He looked at the Gold Source Dragon Emperor and the others calmly and transmitted his voice to Ji Tianqing. "Many years ago, our alliance investigated the number of experts in the abstruse grotto heaven. We have all the information on everyone except for Tan Yu. We only found out that Tan Yu is the vice commander of the Golden Dragon Guards and is not weaker than Qin Yu. But we do not know what race he is, what he looks like, and what skills he is good at. This guy has the nickname of Thousand-Faced Wolf. He never shows his true face and is best at disguise and assassination." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and transmitted his voice. "No wonder he can disguise himself as a heavenly god and be on the verge of death. His life force is weak. He is indeed quite capable. According to what you said, his current appearance of a young man is also a disguise." The Luoho Divine King nodded. Ji Tianqing continued, "The Heartless Divine King is stronger than Tan Yu and is a top assassin. But his assassination skills are based on movement techniques and control of space. And Tan Yu is good at disguise and sneak attacks. Under certain circumstances, he is even more terrifying than the Heartless Divine King and is hard to guard against." The Luoho Divine King nodded and sneered, "Yes. But once this kind of person is exposed, there is nothing to be afraid of. For example, now that they are openly besieging us, I will find a chance to kill Tan Yu later to prevent future trouble." Ji Tianqing thought for a while and reminded, "You instructed Ao Jinying and the others to investigate Wuhan's whereabouts, but it has always been done secretly. The abstruse grotto heaven actually knew about it and even took the opportunity to set up a trap to lure us in. Now it seems that the Enigma Paradise has not only planted spies in the Myriad Demon Alliance but also spies." God King Rahu nodded again, his tone even colder. "That's right. When I realized that I had fallen into their trap, this old servant had already thought of this point. Once this matter is over and we return to the myriad demon city, this old servant will definitely ferret out the spy and cut him into pieces. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor frowned when he saw that Ji Tianxing and Luoho God King were not flustered despite being surrounded. Instead, they were calmly discussing something. He stared at Ji Tianxing and God King Rahu, his lips curling into a cold, sinister smile as he said, "Rao Longtian, I know that you two are very cautious. Therefore, inside and outside the Sky River secret realm, including the surroundings of this mountain, there are no supreme-grade divine arrays set up. I was afraid that you would find out. You've really fallen into the trap. You're like turtles in a jar now. This emperor is benevolent and allows you to say your last words." God King Rahu laughed disdainfully. "Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, perhaps you've been the Dragon Emperor for too long and think that you're invincible? Before coming to the Sky River secret realm, I've already taken precautions against this. Do you think that I would be unprepared? Moreover, you've already mobilized most of your forces to kill us here. Now, I'm afraid that only a few watchdogs are left in your Enigma paradise, right?" God King Rahu's tone was very confident and even carried a hint of threat. The Golden Origin Dragon Emperor frowned immediately, pondering what had gone wrong and whether the Myriad Demon Alliance would take advantage of it. The Heartless God King, Battle Dragon King, Qin Yu, and the others' faces darkened as they secretly raised their guard. However, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor quickly recovered and laughed proudly. You're about to die and you're still putting on airs in front of this emperor? That's right, I've brought most of my trusted subordinates. The Enigma Paradise's defense is indeed weaker than usual. However, it's already good enough that those useless subordinates of yours can defend the Myriad Demon City. Don't tell me that the Myriad Demon Alliance dares to take advantage of this opportunity to attack the Enigma Paradise? God King Rahu smiled and said calmly, "Of course not. However, your Enigma Paradise's men do not have the strength to spare to attack the Myriad Demon City. Therefore, my Myriad Demon City is impregnable and is still safe." Before the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor could speak, the Heartless God King shouted with a dark expression, "So what? As long as we kill you and Long Tian, the Myriad Demon City will fall on its own. The Myriad Demon Alliance that you spent so much effort to build will fall apart in 3 to 5 days without a leader." God King Rahu was not angry and even nodded in agreement. "That's right. If Long Tian and I die here, the Myriad Demon Alliance will naturally fall apart. However, the question is, can you kill us?" The Battle Dragon King took a step forward and exuded a towering battle intent. He roared with a domineering aura, "Rahu, don't try to win a battle of words. I didn't kill you the last time at the Black Sea. Today I'll tear you into pieces." With that, the Battle Dragon King shook his dark golden spear. Divine light burst out from his body as his aura reached its peak and his battle-intent soared. The 30-odd God King experts also gripped their swords and sabers tightly. They gathered their divine power to the peak and prepared to launch a thunderous attack. God King Rahu was fearless. He held his pitch-black divine saber with both hands and sneered, "You're too naive to kill me. Today I'll teach you a lesson that you'll never forget." As his voice fell, his entire body released an invisible aura that spread out in all directions. Immediately after, with the mountain as the center, green, blue and black fog suddenly appeared in a radius of 30,000 miles. The fog of different colors appeared out of nowhere and filled the sky. Strong winds could not blow it away, making it look exceptionally strange. Under the God King Rahu's control, the surrounding fog spread rapidly and gathered toward the mountain peak. The rolling fog gradually gathered like a raging wave. Seeing this, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, the Heartless God King and the Battle Dragon King's faces changed. They were filled with fear. "This poisonous fog. Everyone be careful." As for Ji Tianxing and the God King Rahu, they looked at each other and sneered meaningfully. Others might not know, but Ji Tianxing knew that the God King Rahu's original form was a snake. He had cultivated for more than 20,000 years and cultivated the body of a heavenly dragon from the lowly earth snake. However, the mystiques and secret techniques that he was most proficient in, other than the dragon race's mystic arts, were the snake race's venom. Snakes were inherently sinister. In the next instant, the 5-colored poisonous fog sealed the sky and suppressed the surrounding 30,000 miles. Following a series of screams, the middle-level god kings at the outermost layer of the encirclement were corroded by the poisonous fog and turned into pools of blood. They died tragically on the spot. The weaker middle-level god kings were useless against the five-colored poisonous fog, even if they used their divine power or divine artifacts to protect themselves. Even the stronger high-level god kings were flustered by the poisonous fog. They were all sweating profusely and their faces were green. Chapter 37:28. Just a moment ago, the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's god kings had been arrogant and confident of their victory. At this moment, the pervasive five-colored poison mist had turned the entire area into chaos. Cries of agony could be heard from the crowd, mixed with a few dying cries. The morale of the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's godly kings plummeted. Although the unlucky ones who were corroded by the five-colored poison fog and reduced to blood and godly sparks were only intermediate godly kings, their godly kings had their own godly kings. The high-level divine kings all had their own methods and were still able to resist the invasion of the poisonous fog, so they did not lose their lives on the spot. However, in just 10 breaths of time, the godly kings of the mystical grotto had suffered heavy casualties. 18 intermediate godly kings were poisoned to death on the spot. 3 upper godly kings were seriously injured by the poison and could no longer fight. 2 upper godly kings were also poisoned. Although they were not seriously injured, their battle prowess was greatly reduced. As such, only 17 godly kings were left with battle prowess. Retreat quickly. What are you waiting for? Leave the poison fog area first. The godly kings were panicking. Only the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, Wuxia, and the Battle Dragon King were able to remain calm. Seeing that the five-colored poison fog was very strange and could not be dispersed by divine power, several experts roared angrily and anxiously. Hearing the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor's order, the godly kings felt as if they had been pardoned and fled in panic. If the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor did not give the order, they would not dare to flee. If the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor were to punish them for fleeing, they would lose a layer of skin even if they did not die. Swish swish swish. In the next instant, the 20-odd godly kings who were lucky enough to survive passed through the poison fog at lightning speed and fled into the distance. How could Ji Tianxing and Luoho godly king miss such a good opportunity? The two of them split up and took the opportunity to kill the godly kings who were fleeing in panic. Although the Golden Origin Dragon Emperor Wuxia, the Battle Dragon King, and Qin Yu had split up to cover the retreat of the godly kings, Ji Tianxing and Luoho godly king went all out and successfully killed 7 godly kings before the godly kings were able to leave the fog area. Of course, this included the 5 injured upper godly kings. A while later, when everyone had retreated from the poisonous mist, only 15 god kings remained on the side of the mysterious paradise. Swish, swish. Golden Origin Dragon Emperor, Battle Dragon King and the others stood together while the other 10 immortal kings spread out and formed a battle formation in the sky. Everyone stared at the poisonous fog with cold expressions.